One meet Rudiger Chelsea. He is young, noble, and a complete laughingstock to everyone around him. A rookie professor mocked before he even steps foot inside his very first classroom. But his students quickly realize this new teacher will not be intimidated. On day one, they mock him. "Professor, we are the elite here. Look, if you cannot perform magic at our level, you do not belong here." Rudiger just stares back, completely unbothered, and asks, "So the level here is that?" Lo, how embarrassing. The room freezes in shock as he prepares to show these arrogant brats what real magic actually looks like in practice. At this academy, arrogant noble families look down on weaker bloodlines. Especially a certain professor they call talentless, but they have no idea. The real Rudiger is actually dead. The soul inside him is far from talentless. And he is definitely not nice enough to let their insults slide. While some try to break him down, several female colleagues find themselves drawn to his mysterious charm. As for the other professors, they can only seethe with jealousy. Think you can handle this story? Let us rewind to a few weeks earlier, in a quiet, snowy town. Various buildings surround the academy. Over at the train station, well-dressed wealthy passengers wait for their ride. Each person hands over their ticket to the attendant before boarding. Rudiger gets in line as the station master checks the tickets and welcomes everyone, showing his own pass. Rudiger steps inside the train, locates his cabin, and sits opposite an elderly gentleman. Soon, the train departs into the falling snow. Rudiger opens a book to read, while the older passenger opens his newspaper. The old man smiles, reading about the end of the Civil War. The two strike up a warm conversation, celebrating the peace, and introduce themselves. Gerard guesses by his name that Rudiger is a noble, and Rudiger admits his fallen family is heading directly toward the capital. Gerard is stunned to learn this young man actually teaches at the Magic Academy, impressed by his apparent talent. They discuss the war and the powerful figure behind it. Thoroughly enjoying their chat, suddenly a violent explosion shakes the train. Shocked and alarmed, Rudiger slides open the door to look outside, but finds the long corridor is completely empty. Gerard asks if the other travelers are safe inside, protected by the cabin barriers. But those barriers are useless now. The train's outer defenses have already been breached. The blast clearly originated in the third carriage, leaving them to wonder why the attackers are waiting. Gerard notes that ordinary thieves would target the first carriage, and Rudiger agrees, since that is where the wealthy elite are seated. While they hurriedly plan their escape, an intruder begins smashing their window. Glass shatters as the bandit forces his way inside. Rudiger shields Gerard, stepping forward while firmly gripping his cane. Meanwhile, Gerard realizes, from the attacker's crazed look, that something is seriously wrong with them. Before they can react, the masked assailant lunges with a weapon. Rudiger instantly unleashes a glowing blue orb of energy, as a crackling energy sphere strikes the bandit, shocking him before sending him flying. He crashes backward. The masked attacker hits the ground, completely paralyzed by the spell. Gerard asks if Ludger took the attacker down, but Ludger explains the situation. He only paralyzed him temporarily. The old man warns that it is still dangerous. But Ludger ignores the warning, stepping forward to interrogate the captive thief. Pressing his boot onto the bandit's chest, Ludger demands to know why they attacked. Pinned down, the masked attacker merely grunts and mumbles under his breath. Then he suddenly bursts into laughter. Annoyed, Ludger demands he stop. Glaring with pure hatred, the thief rasps that people like him deserve to die. Without warning, the dying man pulls open his coat, revealing a hidden threat. A bomb is strapped to his chest, fully active. Looking closely, the timer shows only 1 second remains before detonation. Gerard screams in absolute panic. He begs Ludger to run, staring at the flashing device in pure horror. Before anyone can move, the bomb detonates in a blinding, destructive blast. The entire cabin is vaporized. Thick smoke rises from the ruined, shattered train. Coughing through the debris, the dusty but uninjured old man calls out for Ludger. He searches the wreckage until a strange detail suddenly catches his eye. Through the heavy black haze, he sees nobody, just a massive crack in the wall. Gerard peers through the gap, searching the outside darkness for Ludger. As he scans the area, something catches his eye and he freezes. He feels the skin on his own face peeling away with ease. He bursts into wild laughter, complaining about how much that disguise cost him. Peeling off the fake mask, he reveals a handsome, long-haired young man. Now you and I see Machiavelli, a name he took from his past lives. He constantly shifts identities. This time, his disguise worked perfectly. He slipped right past the royal army by playing a frail old man. He regrets young Rudiger's death, realizing these terrorists are no ordinary thieves. Normal train robbers do not happily blow themselves to pieces like this. Suddenly, the train inspector rushes inside to investigate. Ludger quickly warns him to stand back because the area is highly dangerous. But the stubborn officer insists on checking on the other passengers. Sensing the inspector's growing suspicion, Ludger acts without hesitation. He swiftly kicks him down, grabbing him by the throat with a question. Did he really think he would fall for that? The attackers waited for a specific train to enter these treacherous mountain passes. Since the magic barriers were down, they required help from an insider. The fake inspector's fearful face instantly twists into pure dark rage. He secretly slides a dagger from his sleeve, but Ludger catches him. Pinning his hand, Ludger demands to know who they are and what they want. Standing tall and keeping him pinned, Ludger threatens him with his own blade. As the traitor screams, Ludger senses a bizarre disturbance in the air. Hearing an unusual whistling noise, he instantly realizes what is coming. Acting on sheer survival instinct, he pulls the conductor in front of him. In that exact instant, a hail of gunfire shreds the traitor to pieces. Ludger dives out of the way, leaving us to wonder how they knew when to fire. Next thing, the shooter kicks the door, effortlessly smashing it open. Several masked invaders step inside, wondering how anyone could still be alive after that barrage. Ludger asks the leader who he thinks he is, talking about life and death like that. The thugs shout at him, ready to unleash another storm of bullets, but Ludger just gives them a cold, strange look, and suddenly none of them can pull their triggers. The bandits panic and struggle to fire, completely unable to comprehend what is happening. Then one of them glares at the long-haired man, realizing he is actually a powerful mage preparing a gear-shaped spell, using magic to disable all their weapons. Before Ludger can unleash his magic, a sudden impact cancels his spell. Shaken by this sudden block, we watch as he realizes another mage on the train is allied with the bandits. A masked figure carrying a staff appears, and the thugs demand Ludger surrender if he wants an easy death. He quickly figures the enemy mage must be a rank 4 wizard just like him, because if he were stronger, Ludger would have heard of him. 10 minutes have already passed since the explosion, and the train takes a while to cross Ara Mountain, meaning support troops will take time to arrive. Knowing he cannot rely on backup, Ludger suddenly leaps off the speeding train. The bandits are stunned by this reckless move, so they send a henchman to check. The masked wizard looks outside, but sees nothing unusual. He tells his boss the guy jumped out of pure fear. Suddenly, that very bandit is swiftly taken down. That is when the mage realizes the target is right on top of the train. They wonder if he used flight magic and whether keeping up with a speeding train is even humanly possible. He orders a few men after him, while the rest head toward carriage number 1. Several bandits begin firing heavy weapons at the roof, trying to hit him. As we watch him run across the top of the train, the men track his movements from inside. When they reach the rear carriage, a bandit opens the door to that section. At that exact moment, a trap detonates in the door, bursts into flames. The survivors wonder how he set up a trap so quickly. One bandit remarks that this target moves with complete precision and efficiency. He points out that the man acts more like a hunter or a mercenary than a traditional mage. Suddenly, a strange noise echoes through the area. The enemy mage screams, realizing that Ludger has uncoupled the train cars and escaped along the top. He curses himself for not seeing this coming, since now Ludger doesn't even need to fight them. They rush back toward their carriage as the train keeps speeding through the dark mountain ranges. Frustrated, the criminals search for him outside, but they have completely lost track of him. Now they must carry on with their train heist, refusing to back down because of him. The rival mage says he has memorized Ludger's face, declaring they must find him and eliminate him once and for all. But as he speaks, he suddenly senses something horribly wrong. A massive wave of magic surges out of nowhere, leaving everyone shocked as they wonder where this surge of mana is coming from. Standing right before them, Ludger has a massive spell ready in his hand. He raises his palm toward them, ready to unleash his magic. Before they can even react, he unleashes the blast, leaving them. They realize too late that they walked right into another trap, the gear-shaped spell. detonates with incredible force, swallowing the entire area in a blinding white flash. Holding the devastating blast back for a second, the rogue wizard orders his crew to escape right now. Channeling raw magic through his arm, he struggles to counter the spell. As the smoke clears, the bandits lie defeated and broken on the floor. With black smoke curling off their bodies, Ledger wonders if the battle is finally over, but then he spots the enemy leader standing, alive but missing an entire arm. The survivor asks why he had to slaughter his men. He demands to know if he feels any remorse, pointing out his fallen comrades once helped save this world. Highly irritated, Ledger snaps back, explaining he never expected these criminals to be so completely delusional. He furiously reminds him that these outlaws tried to kill him first. Making their demands for sympathy absolutely pathetic, he asks the desperate spellcaster if he is seriously going to lecture him while standing among the corpses of his own men. The scarred leader spits back, demanding to know who gave him the right to judge. At first, the young man only cared about slipping away from the train, but that calculation changes the second the syndicate uncovers his true face. Now he knows they will hunt him down forever. Erasing them now is the only way to protect his future. Before the dying bandit can ask for his real name, a sudden freezing spike pierces and shatters him. Immediately after, Ledger detects the approach of a powerful warrior clad in heavy metal armor. A woman draped in fine silk, polished steel, and a sweeping white cape steps into the ruined carriage, asking if he is hurt and assuring him he is safe. She confidently declares that his ordeal is over and he can finally rest. The legendary Cold Steel Knights have arrived, and the situation is secure. Outside, the remaining bandits realize with dread that these elite warriors used high-tier flight magic through the raging storm. When the desperate outlaws open fire, the heavily armored knights effortlessly deflect the barrage using defensive barriers. In a heartbeat, the knights unleash their offensive spells and charge directly at the terrified plunderers. Panicked, the thieves scramble to escape as the unstoppable force closes in. The last thing they witness is a blinding crest of high-level magic descending right upon them. Thunderous detonation shakes the train, instantly vaporizing the rest of the hostile forces in the compartment. Coordinating through their communication devices, the elite units sweep the train systematically, neutralizing every single remaining threat. The acting commander announces over the comms that all sectors are secure. Commending her unit, she orders them to immediately escort the surviving civilians to the nearest depot. Shortly after, the steam train pulls in and passengers disembark at Lethok Station, while Ledger rests. On a nearby bench, the female commander approaches him to check on his well-being. He replies that he is unhurt and expresses his gratitude for her prompt intervention against the hijackers. She offers her apologies for the delayed introduction, presenting herself as Veronica DeVille, but before Ledger can state his alias, a voice interrupts them. Drawing the commander's gaze away, a sharp-looking investigator asks if she leads the local division, and she confirms her rank as vice captain. The man introduces himself as Officer Remus from Municipal Police Department, inquiring about the high-altitude train assault. Veronica assures him the threat has been thoroughly neutralized, and the detective expresses his gratitude. However, he points out a glaring inconsistency in the preliminary report, requesting permission to interrogate the survivors on how the engine fell so effortlessly. The saboteurs had bypassed the advanced magic wards with ease, raising strong suspicions of an inside job. An insider helped the terrorists, and Veronica DeVille agrees it makes sense. Even if it is just a theory, Ramias says once they identify the culprit, he will order a full investigation. Veronica then asks Gerard if he overheard their conversation, assuring him he will be fine if he is honest. Our guy maintains a cool, composed smile on the outside, but internally he knows this is bad. His ticket is perfectly fine, but the real problem is his face. He does not look like a man. His 40s, so any investigation will quickly expose his fake identity. Most likely he will be tortured or hanged. Running is not an option either, since too many police and knights are stationed right outside. On top of that, Vice Captain Veronica seems merciless toward criminals right now. She seems friendly, but that will change the moment she suspects him. Ramiz asks if he is all right, explaining that it took some time to obtain the passenger list. He tells him not to worry, since they are only verifying identities. Ramiz asks for his ticket, and our guy hands it over. Together with a crew member, they check cabin 4003, confirming Gerard and Ledger were There, Ramiz asks where the other man is, and he answers that he died in the blast falling off the cliff while crossing the mountains. Officer. Ramiz considers this whole explanation, while our guy swallows hard in panic. Suddenly, Veronica steps in, declaring that this man should not be treated as a suspect. She explains that he fought the terrorists before the Knights arrived, meaning he has no reason to work with them. Ramiz is shocked too. Here he fought those criminals, apologizing immediately. Then Ramiz addresses him as Ledger, asking if Sarin Academy hired him. Both now look at him differently, seeing him in a new light, grabbing his suitcase with a smile. Our guy confirms he was indeed hired by Sarin, introducing himself as Lugar Chalazi. He explains that he is their newly recruited professor. Ramiz apologizes again, but Ledger thanks them for their hospitality during the journey. The officer offers to escort him to Sarin Academy, but Ledger politely declines, insisting he will go alone, adding that since he will teach future generations, he wants to help, but being escorted by police and knights would actually be much worse for him. He explains that he has personal matters elsewhere and appreciates their offer. Taking his leave, he thanks them for the pleasant encounter. Veronica thanks him too, saying she hopes to meet him again soon. Quickly, Lugar, the master of disguise, slips away into the crowd as he walks alone through the streets, feeling incredibly relieved to have shaken off both the police and the knights. Mentally, he apologizes to the dead Ledger, but stealing his identity was his only way to escape the trap. Fortunately, camera technology in this world is still very primitive. Since nobody can truly tell him apart from Ledger in a photo, he believes things will be smooth sailing from now on. He plans to lie low and build a new life, but then a voice suddenly calls out the name Ledger Shao, explaining they spotted him speaking with the knights earlier. An elderly man introduces himself as Wilford, a staff member from Sarin Academy. Thrilled to see Ledger is unharmed, Wilford explains that he arrived to pick him up after the train left. With no other choice, Ledger steps inside Wilford's horse-drawn carriage. The carriage actually runs on mechanical gears as they head toward Sarin. Sitting on the luxurious red couch inside, the man remains deep in thought. He knows this is a dangerous situation because the person sent to fetch him is clearly no ordinary worker. Beyond his strong posture, Ledger never even felt him approach, meaning the man was likely once a knight. Ledger knows that if he tries to make up weak excuses, Wilford will get suspicious and hunt him down, so he decides to stay calm. After all, he is basically a ghost in this country now that Gerard is dead. Even if he gets taken somewhere, nobody will notice his disappearance. It is much safer to keep up his confident act and completely play the part of Ledger. Suddenly, they arrive at Sarin Academy, and the massive gates swing open to let the carriage pass. He gets his first look at the academy, an incredible massive campus with a giant central garden. Stunned by the view, Ledger asks if all of this belongs to the school. Wilfred says he will take Ledger straight to the director and tells him to leave his bags behind. Ledger stands before a massive structure that looks just like a White Castle. Once they step inside, they enter a grand hall filled with beautiful decorations on the floor. Ledger introduces himself to the director as Ledger Shawleys, explaining that he has arrived as summoned. Desk further back in the room, a woman sits with a dark, complex look on her face. The director of Sarin Academy, Alyssa Willow, says she has been eagerly waiting for Ledger to arrive. Alyssa asks if he is fine after the train attack, and Ledger replies that it was nothing because the knights helped him. She is glad he is unhurt, mentioning that the academy's reputation would suffer if anything happened to him. Ledger notices that the director seems a bit unhinged, openly speaking about the academy's reputation. Like that, the master of disguise has actually had a bad feeling about this entire situation from the start. He wonders if Alyssa still has not realized his true identity or if she ever met the real Ledger in person. Alyssa notes that Ledger is quite handsome and mentions this is their first time meeting face to face, so he thanks her for the compliment. She adds that the students will be quite rebellious at the start of term, then hands him a document to stay safe, even though she had already informed him about it earlier. Willow guarantees a 2-year contract with food, housing, and the salary they agreed on, but as Ledger reviews the paper, he is already planning to escape as soon as he can. Reading the contract, he finds out the salary is 30 imperial gold coins in the continent's current currency. That translates to 30 million dinars or $300,000. Alyssa asks Ledger what he thinks of the terms, assuring him it is a very generous offer. On the outside, Ledger remains calm and says it looks good, but on the inside, he feels like he hit the jackpot. This high pay means the expectations for Professor at Serene Academy are incredibly high. Ledger decides to adapt to this new environment so he can meet those expectations, even with so many geniuses gathered around. The main thing is that his job is secure and refusing backing out after coming all this way would look too suspicious. He knew he had to accept and then play his usual game of deception and manipulation. Ledger told her he reviewed the contract and found it perfect. He had plenty of real-world experience and magical knowledge, making him confident he could play the part of a decent professor. Willow held out her hand, looking forward to working with him. Shaking her hand, he replied that the feeling was mutual. He knew he just had to survive for 2 years, and then he would finally be free. Night fell and the full moon lit up the rooms across Serene Academy. Ledger had 3 weeks before classes started, giving him plenty of time to prepare. It was almost funny to him that they rented an entire house just for his use. As he relaxed, the reality of his new life as a professor started to sink in. He remembered it had been 27 years since he was reborn into this world. He had arrived without any special abilities, armed only with memories of a past life where he had survived entirely on his own. Due to negligent parents, after surviving endless hardships he never imagined he would end up teaching at Serene, Ledger had to admit that this was nothing but a forced disguise. He desperately needed a new identity, and the real Ledger was the perfect target for a little theft. After all, the man was a fallen noble from a tiny kingdom, an only child whose parents were long gone. His mail consisted of purely formal letters showing no close friends or personal ties. That meant nobody would ever see through his cover, making it the absolute perfect identity for him. The only thing Ledger lacked at the moment was detailed information about Serene and its classes. But before he could dig into any of that, his stomach growled with hunger. Deciding to leave work for tomorrow, he headed out to find some food. Time passed quickly. Soon, Ledger was sitting in a cafe with a warm coffee in hand. He realized 2 weeks had already flown by while he settled in and drafted his lessons. With just 1 week left before classes started, he needed to put his plans into action. Since the cafe was starting to fill up, he decided to review his lesson plans one more time. Suddenly, a hooded figure sat down behind him, whispering that they were relieved he was safe and unhurt. Ledger remained completely silent, hiding a sudden jolt of alarm. Still, he kept calm on the outside and slowly sipped his coffee. The stranger asked why he had not reached out over the last 2 weeks, adding that the members were eager to know where Sir First Order had been. Ledger had no clue what this person was talking about, yet the Master of Disguise remained completely silent. The stranger mentioned needing to confirm something, and Ledger realized these people were actually searching for the man whose identity he stole. They had been looking for the real Ledger, Chelsea, all along. Looking nervous, the hooded figure explained the train attack was an accident. Claiming they had no idea rebels were going to strike, Ledger spoke up, demanding information about Serene. Shocked, the messenger asked if his group had failed to send him anything. Ledger replied that he was simply checking if the data they sent was accurate. On the inside, he was completely confused, and Ledger quietly tries to figure out who these people are, playing along to avoid raising any suspicion about his disguise, asking if they completed their mission. The hooded figure reveals that before arriving, they eliminated every key figure at the Magic Academy, adding that they disposed of the traitors inside their organization by executing them brutally and feeding them to dogs. Hearing this, Ledger realizes how bad this situation is and what kind of dark schemes the real Ledger was involved in. He grows tense, and the man apologizes for not checking the details sooner. Ledger tries to stay calm and keep up appearances, asking why the man came looking for him so suddenly. The man explains that it was because of his sudden disappearance for half a month, which makes Ledger react with sharp anger. Ledger asks if he dared to act on his own during such a critical moment, making him apologize in shock, while Chelsea commands him to stay quiet, slamming his teacup onto the table. Ledger claims the man's suspicious clothes were already annoying him. He asks if he wants to look even more suspicious, noticing how the guy reacts excessively to his every move. It is clear from these reactions that this Person is terrified of the man named Ledger Chelsea, deciding to check there. Numbers. Ledger asks how many people have gathered so far. The purple-haired man answers that 31 second-order members and 7 third-order members have successfully infiltrated, while the first-order members arrived earlier to prepare. Plan. Ledger acknowledges this and tells him to stand up now that he confirmed the man then states that for their next meeting, they can go to the pre-designated location. Ledger intimidates him right away, asking if a lower being is giving him orders to come and go as he pleases. The man starts trembling in sheer terror of Ledger and begs for forgiveness. Ledger declares that he will decide when the next meeting happens, since only people like him can set up those gatherings. Still shaking, the man asks if people like him belong to Order Zero. Agreeing with his subordinate, Ledger tells him not to bother him with such small details. He turns his back and leaves, realizing in his mind that these people are extremely dangerous. Besides getting rid of key academy figures, he wonders what else they did to the traitor. As he walks out, the hooded man suddenly asks him to wait. Ledger feels nervous and hesitates but decides to listen to what the purple-haired man has to say. The man asks when Ledger will call them again and how he plans to send the signal. Inside, Ledger is completely confused since he never thought that far ahead. He threatens the man in a subtle way, asking if he really needs to answer that question. Finally, Ledger returns to his room and starts looking into his assumed identity, finding out that Ledger Chelsea is a fallen noble with no family left. He is also listed as a professor at Sharon who reached rank 4 faster than anyone else, leaving him deeply frustrated. Ledger feels he should have suspected this much earlier. The reason Ledger seemed like such an ideal man was because he was just a persona made for that goal, since he could not use his real identity to infiltrate the academy. Turns out the letters sent and received under the name Ledger Chelsea were actually coded messages. Ledger realizes just how complex this situation really is. His mind starts to spin. He simply cannot believe the reckless path he chose brought him straight into the storm. As he reads the letters, he notices the real Ledger sent coded messages using the Quadan language. This strange text leaves him doubtful, but beyond that, his biggest threat is the First Order infiltrating Charon Academy as a professor with inside help makes absolutely no sense. He knows more orders will arrive soon, and Charon is not his only worry right now. The more he contemplates how ridiculous this is, the more his head pounds. An executive of a massive secret organization dying in some terrorist attack sounds absurd. Ledger was a top member of a society with dozens of spies inside Charon. A mastermind like him should have survived both the train hijacking and the attack, but complaining to a dead man is useless. Still, he must now hide both his identity and an entire shadow society. He thinks reaching out to them today is his best move. From what he has gathered so far, the group is divided into 4 factions, starting from Order Zero. He has no leads on Order Zero yet, though they exist. Uncovering who they sent is his most urgent mission. If that contact knew the original Ledger, they will immediately expose him. For now, his priority is keeping his stolen identity under wraps. His ultimate plan is arranging for Charon Academy to wipe out the group. The Academy has immense power, and the secret society stands no chance if they clash. He also must feed them just enough intel to avoid suspicion. Walking this stressful tightrope to please everyone exhausts him completely. Just thinking about it, despite feeling totally drained, he cannot afford to waste the next 2 years. Morning comes to the grand, majestic Charon Academy, where eager students gather to chat. Inside a lecture hall, students take their seats and gossip about the arrival of their elite new second-year professor. They do not believe this was a planned hire, since the last teacher suddenly resigned. Rumors fly about a student who confronted him in public. A close classmate warns Flora that everyone is whispering about her. But she doesn't get what she did wrong. She only wanted to point out that the teacher's spellcasting was flawed. The others mention he is highly sophisticated, having published military research papers. One student eagerly adds that he is actually a fallen aristocrat. Some feel disappointed, assuming it will be easy to get good marks from him. Suddenly, cutting through the noise, the new professor enters the room with effortless confidence. He slams his palm onto the lectern introducing himself and declaring it a pleasure to meet. Then he is Ludger. The room falls silent, stunned by his presence. Since it is the course adjustment period, he explains he will not start the core syllabus just yet. Instead, he will teach spellcasting, focusing on real combat practice over dry theory. On top of that, this class is not just for sophomores. Freshmen are invited too. Ludger tells everyone to quiet down, acknowledging their complaints but staying firm. He makes it crystal clear that his lessons will not be getting any easier. A student raises her hand, asking why freshmen are even allowed to join. She is an arrogant blonde with blue eyes who looks strangely familiar to him. Ledger responds that his duty as a professor is to teach everyone equally, no matter their grade, but she points out his curriculum is highly unusual. She demands a much more detailed explanation of what he has planned. Ledger replies that spoiling the surprise now would take away all the fun. She will just have to attend his lectures to satisfy her curiosity. Next, he addresses the students expecting easy grades just because he is new. He warns them that they will deeply regret making such assumptions. If anyone expects a free pass, they should simply not show up. His lectures are ready, and having fewer students is actually better anyway. Besides, if second-year students have to study alongside freshmen, it hurts their pride and nobody wants to join a difficult class. Anyway, Ledger wraps up his introduction and asks if anyone has questions. The classroom feels the suffocating weight of this former military officer's gaze. They also whisper rumors that he is the youngest to reach rank 4 in history, so despite having questions, nobody dares speak up. Nobody has the courage. Before a girl can speak, Ludger ends it. He closes the session and leaves, surprised they did not ask basic questions. While this is a great outcome, it also means his prepared answers are completely useless now. He wonders if they are just ignoring him. Perhaps they are deliberately shutting him out, overthinking the situation. Our guy wonders if he should have acted friendlier and less scary. Lost in thought, he suddenly notices his fellow professors surrounding him. It was only a private theory of his, but it proves true. A polite, pink-haired woman steps forward to introduce herself to him. Her name is Selena, and she is a new professor just like him. Ledger greets her with polite respect as they exchange pleasantries. In a friendly tone, she asks if he has had lunch yet. Next, he meets Bruno, who teaches the art of golem summoning. Then Malda introduces herself as the professor specializing in hallucinations, curses, and dispelling magic. Ludger introduces himself as a spellcasting teacher. One of the female professors immediately compliments his striking looks. She gushes that he is even more handsome up close. Meanwhile, a blue-haired man in glasses quietly glances in Ledger's direction. He quickly turns away the moment Ledger catches his strange stare. Malda introduces him as Professor Chris Benamor, a highborn noble. Ledger quickly calculates the group. They have 1 fallen noble, 1 active aristocrat, and 3 commoners, all from completely different backgrounds. Yet, despite their social differences, every single one is highly skilled. This suggests a strong chance that a member of the First Order is hiding among them. He cannot trust a single new colleague. Colleagues, sensing that something feels deeply off about them, suddenly announces he cannot stand being there any longer, having expected much better from the fresh staff. He scoffs that there is only 1 fallen noble among a bunch of commoners, flat out refusing to join them. He even sneers at Ludger to stop acting like nobility when he is just a fallen one. Malda steps in, explaining that not all nobles are like Chris, and asks Ludger not to take it to heart. Ludger simply tells the others to eat. Without him, an invitation that Bruno happily accepts on the spot. In the end, Ludger tells himself he should just be glad to stick to his usual routine of eating alone. Night eventually falls over the academy, where a glowing blue magic circle flares to life inside a room. A few students discuss the new Professor, Ludger whispering rumors that he is the youngest mage to reach rank 4, has military experience, fought in a cryptid hunt, and even carved his name into the magic tower. A girl placing her hand on the magic circle wonders if these wild stories are actually true. She thinks to herself that she cannot afford to ruin the plans of the First Order during his class. In fact, she wants to push as many students as possible to attend Ludger's lectures. Another student uses magic to ask if a first year can join the course, and the rest of the group finds the idea exciting enough to sign up as well. As time passes, Ludger walks down the hallway getting ready to give his very first lecture, while wondering how many students stayed after. His harsh warning about the difficulty of his course, he assumes that anyone who actually showed up only did so because they had no other options. He expects around 30 students at most, while expecting the other classrooms to be completely packed. Inside the classroom, the students whisper quietly among themselves, waiting for their teacher to arrive. Moments later, Ludger steps through the door. The professor is completely taken aback when he sees the crowd in front of him. All 80 seats are taken, leaving him wondering why it is so packed. On top of that, most of the crowd consists of first years who already look up to him, and he wonders if they feel any pressure sitting alongside the upperclassmen. He suspects that the girl might have set this whole situation up behind the scenes. Then again, it is also possible that he simply underestimated the students and their fierce drive to succeed. He knows that Saran Academy gathers the brightest young minds on the continent. He realizes his earlier warning actually fired up their spirits, and now he has to commit to the situation. He decides to introduce himself again for the new students, taking his position as their spell-casting professor, fully aware that he must give this lecture his absolute all. The lesson begins with a question about the 4 specialization processes. Ludger sternly tells the class that questions are only allowed when he permits them. He warns them that from now on, anyone who disobeys his orders will lose points, though there will also be opportunities to earn bonus points through hard work. Answering the student's question, he explains he will be teaching the 4 main specializations. These 4 fields include release, elemental property, telekinesis, and reinforcement. It is usually difficult. Teaching even 2 of these classes is tough, yet as a new professor, he must handle all 4. He is the new professor. A blue-haired girl judges Ludger, thinking his goals are pure exaggeration. Is completely unrealistic. Taking advantage of this being his first class, Ludger decides to show the students something truly impressive. He presents a rank 3 fire spell called Flickering Flames, which works by utilizing release to trigger combustion, then compressing, expanding, and rapidly accelerating. Its 7 different components must interconnect to form this flame spell. Ludger intends to show them how to cast this spell 3 times faster. Naturally, the students wonder if it is actually possible to slash a spell's casting time. A blonde girl asks if Flora thinks he's lying, and Flora replies that she doesn't believe it's possible. There is the scroll method, which actively stores spells inside a component, and memory reverberation, but both have clear limitations. Flora states that if Ludger relies on either of those 2 methods, she will be incredibly disappointed in him. Sensing the students are full of questions, Ludger gives them permission to ask. Multiple students from both first and second years flood him with questions, asking if he modified the spell's core technique. He responds that changing a technique would actually create an entirely new spell. Instead, he will present the technique exactly as it is, but with a drastically reduced casting time. Raising her hand, the blue-haired girl firmly states that this is impossible. Ludger watches her with absolute composure and total confidence. The blue-haired girl introduces herself as Flora Lumos, second-year student. The other students realize Flora has finally stepped up to challenge the professor. Ludger calmly asks the girl why she believes it's so impossible. She explains that current magical formulas claim the only way to achieve this is through endless repetition and practice, pointing out he's trying to teach something even top geniuses cannot pull off. Ludger asks if they actually cannot improve or if they simply refuse to try. Confusing the class, he explains that magic has completely stagnated because it remains too focused on tradition, while rapid scientific progress has begun to threaten its place in the world. Ludger clarifies that he isn't arguing for science over magic, but insists that magic can still evolve. He tells Flora she is mistaken and that he will be the first to enhance magic. Shocked, Flora asks if he really means those words, thinking he is far too arrogant. Finding it hard to explain with words alone, he decides to demonstrate, asking them for the average casting time of this spell. Flora responds that it depends on rank, but the average ranges between 5 and 10 seconds. Ludger says he dislikes thinking in terms of mage ranks, preferring methods tailored to his own students. Flora then confirms the average is about 5 seconds, confidently claiming she can do it even faster. Ludger notices her confidence and invites her to demonstrate in front of the class. Flora stands up to showcase The spell to everyone, she waves her wand and the flickering flame begins to take shape. Within seconds, the magic circle for the fire spell appears in the air. The students are amazed by her casting speed, though they expect it as much from a Lumos family member. Ledger clocks her time at 4.78 seconds. An impressive speed for a second-year student, he acknowledges. He acknowledges her perfect technique, but points out it is still too slow. Completely crushing Flora's confidence, he reveals that the fastest recorded time for Rank 3 mage is 4.41 seconds, making her too slow. Ledger then declares that even 4.4 seconds is a crawl. The class is stunned, wondering how fast he can cast it himself. Urging the students to pay close attention, he offers to demonstrate the flickering flame spell. The moment he raises his wand, Flora notices his movement doesn't match the standard casting. In an instant, the spell is already complete, leaving the entire classroom speechless and in sheer shock. He didn't even take a single second to finish. Flora notices no visible casting process at all, asking if they caught that. Ledger offers to show them once more for anyone who missed it. Again, he casts the spell instantly, taking less than a second. The entire class is left utterly silent, frozen in pure astonishment, while Ledger observes their faces. Checking the time, Ledger notes it took 0.24 seconds, which is a massive leap from the current record. Flora finds this bizarre, noting his technique wasn't the standard flickering flame. Ledger explains that he used one spell to accelerate another, impressing the students even more. By setting up specific conditions, he triggers pre-selected results instantly. He compares it to a programming flowchart, where the mage acts as biological hardware, consuming mana as data and following a technique program to activate the magic software. Ledger calls this concept source code, something Flora has never heard of in her life. Ledger asks if her question is finally answered, and she confirms that it is. He then tells her that she interrupted his class without permission because she couldn't look past her own biases. When he asks if she admits her mistake, the girl hesitantly acknowledges it. The professor states that her actions were an unjustifiable challenge to his authority. Because of this, Flora Lumos receives a 10-point penalty. This harsh punishment shocks her friend. Flora seems to hold back her tears as she turns to go back to her seat like a spoiled child. However, since her flickering flame technique was flawless, Ledger rewards her with 10 points. After all, he doesn't dislike skilled students and her technique was impressive. Flora thanks him. The rest of the class feels relieved when they realize her penalty points were canceled out. Cheryl asks Flora if she's okay, and Flora says she's fine, thanking her friend for checking on her. Cheryl is impressed by how fast Flora recovers from the scolding. Inside, though, Flora struggles with a mental conflict and stays quiet in deep thought. After this, Ledger takes off his coat and announces that the actual lesson begins now. He says he'll pick a few students who can keep up to teach them about source code, telling the class they have to work hard if they want to learn. The whole classroom is impressed. They expected a terrible class because of the rumors about Ledger. Instead, the students are surprised by the high quality of the lesson, which matches the prestigious standards of Sharon Academy. Eventually, Ledger decides to wrap up the class at this advanced. With that, he dismisses the class to review, amazed by the source code technique. The students cannot stop buzzing about the class. Just then, an arrogant noble mocks their excitement, calling them stupid. The blonde noble sneers, "This is why commoners like them are worthless." The student targeted by his harsh words doesn't even realize the blonde boy is speaking to him. Annoyed, the rich kid asks if he is being mocked, but the student quickly denies it. Furious, the noble demands to know how a mere commoner dares to ignore Jebin, eldest son of Baron Filio. Leo asks if the Filio barony is located way out on the outskirts of the empire. Growing even pettier, Jebin asks if the academy accepts just anyone these days. Leo fires back that it is still better than accepting a petty baron's foolish child. Enraged, Jebin starts chanting a spell. Unfazed by the magical threat, Leo just looks him up and down with disdain, telling him to go ahead and try. He taunts Jebin, daring him to cast the spell right now to see what happens. He reminds Jebin that even as a noble, he won't get away with it easily. Asking if he even bothered to read the academy rules when he joined, Leo points out that Jebin was shouting, without realizing the room was still packed with witnesses. Enraged, Jebin grits his teeth, looks around and storms off, leaving With a final threat to watch his back, deeply grateful. The student with glasses introduces himself as Aiden. Leo introduces himself and brushes off the gratitude, saying he was just annoyed by Jebin acting like a typical arrogant noble. Aiden ignores his modesty, excitedly, declaring that Leo is the greatest in the world. Fully thrilled, Leo decides to leave, but Aiden insists on following, not even knowing. They are going, spotting Leo carrying an alchemy book. Aiden says he takes that. Class 2, only half interested. Leo tells him to do whatever he wants. He also warns him not to make those hand gestures again, but Aiden is clueless. He asks if Leo meant Connor's signals or the gestures of a novice who has not learned magic properly yet. Leo explains he needs to understand how things work in Shireen since second-year students have a solid foundation. He points to Flora Lumos, today's standout student in class, to help Aiden understand. Leo adds that her personality is terrifying and warns Aiden to avoid her, bringing up rumors that the previous professor quit because of her. Another example is the third princess, Eleanor von Zillion. Leo warns that only trouble awaits any commoners like them who try interacting with her. Finally, there is Freuden Volberg, who leads the second-year noble faction. Aiden asks if he means the famous Volberg family, one of the 3 most powerful ducal families. Leo confirms it, adding that they view commoners as mere insects, so it is best to avoid them. On top of that, Jebin is in that faction and has already marked Aiden. Amazingly, Aiden says he does not care about them, leaving Leo wondering if the kid is brave or just insane. Leo warns him about a few other nobles to avoid, promising to explain everything on the way. Meanwhile, a white-haired noble watches them closely. Meanwhile, Ledger walks through the corridors, thinking about his class and noting that it went far better than he expected. He realizes that this world resembles the 19th century. Even with magic, it still lacks modern science compared to 21st century science. That is why he merged magic and technology to create his unique source code concept. Yet, he never expected such a positive reaction. When his master first saw the creation, his reaction merely confirmed the theory. He offered no real praise, only noting that Ledger could now cast magic faster, though he was still stuck at rank 3, creating spells. It was still brutally hard. Ledger knows he cannot rely on this source code technique too often or he will get caught. Pausing in front of a grand door, he wonders if this is his new office. Opening it, he finds a massive room and a white-haired woman waiting. She welcomes him warmly and asks if he likes the elegant space, explaining that Soren guarantees total privacy for professors to do as they please. Intrigued, Ledger asks what she does in her office. She playfully asks if she is not allowed here. He replies he is just curious about the reason for her sudden visit. The director calls Ledger a highly valued professor at Soren who deserves special attention, meeting her sharp, piercing gaze. His entire body tenses up. She immediately questions his incredibly cold reaction, expecting more surprise, but he has already had more than enough shocks today. Honestly, even if a ghost appeared at midnight, he wouldn't be this startled. The director then mentions how much the other faculty members praised his teaching. Ledger wonders if she visited their offices too. Trying to decipher her true motive, he worries she might suspect his secrets. After all, even with a secret society, a director would notice unusual movements happening right under her nose here at Soren Academy. He fears she has connected the dots and now suspects him. It feels completely unfair, though. The real Ledger belonged to that society. But he does not. She then mentions his massive class size, and he explains he simply did not want to exclude any eager students. Surprisingly, the director actually agrees with his inclusive approach. She notes there are some truly exceptional first-year students, including one with highly unusual magic. She warns him to avoid trouble, especially since the young princess is currently enrolled in his class. While she needs no favors, any incident involving her would be disastrous. Ledger absorbs this quietly, and the director adds she has high expectations of him. She is also pleased that he finished his first class successfully. Receiving highly positive student feedback, Ledger politely offers her some tea. And though she appreciates the gesture, she has too many pressing matters. Leaving the office, she advises him to take good care of himself. Outside, an old companion asks how the meeting went and if Ledger can truly be trusted. The director admits she is still unsure, keeping a very close eye on the Academy's 2 most suspicious figures. She has reached no conclusions yet, though the old man notes her presence. Here speaks volumes, agreeing, she mentions using her legendary evil eye. Vascania on him twice, she never expected him to stay completely unaffected. After all, a mere rank 4 mage should have collapsed. For the trick, yet, he endured the test through sheer determination without showing a single reaction. She claims he is a truly remarkable man. Reflecting on the train ambush and the group hiding in Stiran, she feels she cannot afford to ignore minor details. She weighs the disturbing possibility that the attack was a mere distraction and Ludger was replaced. She asks Mr. Wolford for his input, even without any solid proof. The old man admits that Ludger is unusual, even if it is just an old man's intuition. The director knows he has sharp judgment when reading people. She decides she must keep observing the professor for a longer period to discover his true nature. Back in his private office, Ludger lies on the sofa, completely exhausted. Drained, the professor realizes that meeting wasn't a casual conversation but a tense interrogation. Even though he feels anxious, he knows his cover is clean and decides to press forward with his mission. He begins reading up on Flora, hoping her noble family won't pressure him over the classroom incident. He reasons she has no reason to take it personally, especially since he gave her points to smooth things over. He notes several talented individuals, from the foreign prodigy backed by the magic tower to the imperial princess. Reviewing the file of Four-Eyed Aiden, he wonders if this is the student possessing that rumored unusual magic. Ludger realizes the boy's face looks familiar and expects to recall him eventually. He knows he cannot relax his guard after witnessing how closely the director observed him. Caught in a tight spot, he questions whether to side with the secret society or with Soren. After all, that girl addressed him as First Order and accepted his new appearance without any hesitation. He considers the possibility that the original Ludger was an expert in disguise and stealth. However, he swiftly dismisses the idea, knowing the dangers of aligning with the secret society. There is zero guarantee they would ever protect him, even if he contributes to their cause. For now, he must perform perfectly as a professor until a sudden knock sounds at the door. A messenger stands there to deliver an official patrol warrant. Instantly, he recalls a clause in his contract regarding this very duty. Today, it is his turn. The courier leaves swiftly after delivering the document to his door. The professor is not pleased with the idea of pulling patrol duty. Meanwhile, night falls over the academy, and in a training hall, a blonde acts out aggressively. Another student refuses to leave, stating it is a common area open to anyone. The blonde girl snaps that if they are annoyed, they should be the ones to leave, then insults her by calling her commoner. In response, the girl firmly asserts that Soren does not group students by social status or nobility. Dinma sneers, telling her not to believe lies designed only to pacify the commoners. The noble faction mocks the girl, claiming that peasants are foolish for trying to climb to their status. The girl realizes that no matter what she says, these arrogant nobles will never listen to her. Dinma then demands that after speaking such absolute nonsense, the girl must drop to her knees and beg the nobility for forgiveness. Turning away, the commoner ignores her, infuriating the blonde. She can't believe the audacity of a lowborn. Blinded by rage, the girl raises her wand and begins casting a spell. She targets the helpless girl. Sparks of blue energy burst from a glowing magic circle, shooting right at her. The other snobbish nobles stare in shock at Dinma's extreme reaction. Shaking in fear, she screams as the magic closes in, but just before impact, the spell is shattered in midair and completely vanishes. Furious, Dinma demands to know who dared block her magic. Suddenly, a voice asks what exactly they are doing and expresses disbelief that anyone would cast magic outside the designated training grounds. The newcomer labels it an unfair attack and asks how such an incident could happen so early in the term. Ludger stands with his wand raised, blocking the blast from striking the helpless girl, coldly noting that Surin Academy must seem like a joke to them. The humble girl looks relieved to see him. He remarks that a warning might suffice near training grounds, near the arena, but this was a blatant attack. Dinma snaps, demanding to know why he is interfering, claiming she was merely defending her noble authority. Ludger firmly declares that all students are equal within Surin Academy. He warns that no matter how noble their bloodline, this offense will not go unpunished. He orders Dinma to Follow him immediately. Infuriated, she insults Ledger, calling him a fallen noble. Dread grips her as the other students watch in utter shock at what she just said. Ledger turns to face her, his expression twisting with intense wrath, asking what she uttered. She instantly freezes, paralyzed by his terrifying, suffocating aura. With dark voice, he orders her to repeat herself, causing everyone in the area to freeze in sheer terror. Looming over her, the powerful professor asks if she truly called him a fallen aristocrat. A panicked student runs to call for Professor Selena to defuse the crisis. Arriving quickly, a stunned Selena points at Ledger and shouts to stop him, but as Ledger stands with his hand raised high, Selena screams for him to hold back. Instead, he simply rests his palm on the blonde girl's shoulder as she braces for the worst. Ledger quietly admits that she is absolutely correct, baffling the entire crowd, especially Dinma herself. She asks what he means. Ledger calmly explains that he indeed is merely a ruined noble, but within Surin he acts as her professor, meaning her outburst directly challenged his authority. Keeping his hand heavy on her shoulder, he softly asks if he is incorrect. He notes how difficult it must be at her age to adapt to a new environment. Therefore, he will overlook her insult with a warning, but she will still face strict disciplinary action for attacking her fellow student. Ledger turns to Lin, asking if she is hurt. Her quick nod of reassurance brings relief to him. He promptly hands the remaining details over to Professor Selena. As he departs, Lin is shocked that the cold professor actually knows her name. She is merely a commoner surrounded by 80 wealthy nobles. Why would he ever notice her? She recalls his powerful words that everyone is equal in Surin. This spark of hope gives Lin courage, having once feared him as a terrifying instructor. Now she feels she can truly trust him, resolving to work her hardest. Later, night falls. Ledger sits alone on a bench, rubbing his temples with a heavily troubled expression, suffering in agony. He retrieves a mysterious vial from his coat, putting a few pills in his mouth to ease his pain. He knows he would be in deep trouble without these life-saving pills. Annoyed, Ledger wonders why a sudden commotion had to break out right then, nearly exposing his pathetic weakness. He first felt the symptoms creeping in at the training center, but they were manageable at first. Things quickly worsened during the meeting, and as his condition decayed, he desperately wanted to escape, but that blonde loudmouth chimed in at the worst moment. Still, he managed to salvage the situation despite feeling awful. He just swallowed the last pill in his bottle, which must last him another 5 days. An incident could easily occur during this time, forcing Ledger to use magic, but getting refills from the pharmacy is too risky since every purchase is recorded. Ledger realizes he must contact a certain contact immediately. Soon, the sky brightens as a new day begins at Sarin Academy. Selena mentions a werewolf, leaving Ledger utterly confused, prompting him to question her. Selena repeats the word werewolf, explaining that students spotted a strange shadow leaping across rooftops the previous night. Ledger dismisses it as a silly rumor, and Selena concurs. However, she adds that students reportedly saw the creature inside the academy. While it could be a misunderstanding, bizarre occurrences often plague the campus. She then brings up the famous 7 mysteries, asking if Ledger is familiar with them. When he questions their validity, she insists they are genuine. Ledger teasingly remarks on her obsession with the occult. She explains that it was just research to bond with her students, but as she starts over-explaining and desperately denying it, Ledger tells her to relax. Meralda then joins them, bringing up the groundbreaking topic from his debut lecture. It is a revolutionary casting technique that slashes activation time, and she asks for its official name. Selena suddenly blurted out that it is called source code, making the moment incredibly awkward. Intrigued by the reveal, Moralda asks if such magic is actually possible, and Luger confirms it. Both professors are stunned that a single spell can rewrite the laws of magic. Nearby professors in the hall quickly turn their gaze toward Luger, fueling his discomfort. Meralda notes that since word has spread, the entire faculty is fixated on his spell. She wonders if showcasing the technique on campus would be an issue, while Selena suggests securing a patent from the magic tower, but Ledger knows that is a terrible idea. Without a powerful backer, his creation would just be stolen and his safety compromised. Naturally, he dreads the prospect of the tower getting too close. Worse, the surrounding faculty are already staring at him with intense curiosity, especially Crisp and Amore. Soon, his mind drifts back to the werewolf Tales Selena shared, night swiftly falls and a brilliant full moon rises. Over Saran Academy, waiting in the shadows, Ledger notes that his contact is taking far too long. He wonders if they got lost, but they are. Already standing directly behind him, a werewolf silently creeps out of the shadows. Right behind Ledger, with zero warning, the beast strikes with razor-sharp claws. Lugger effortlessly evades the lethal strike with a swift dodge, seizing the sudden opening. He counters with a heavy kick, launching the beast backward. Lugger mumbles that he now understands why his target took so long. This was just a prank. The werewolf sarcastically asks if it would hurt Ledger to just stand still and look shocked. Standing up, he remarks it has been ages and calls Ledger his big brother. Ledger agrees it has been far too long, calling him Hands. He jokes that Hands brings chaos wherever he goes, then asks about his appearance this time. Hands asks Ledger how he would like ending up like this, all because some tiny dog chased him around. Ledger mocks his body, which really gets on Hands' nerves because it is actually a curse. Hands suffers from a condition that transforms him into whatever beast bites him, which turns him into a half-human beast whenever the trait triggers. If a cat bites him, he turns into a cat. This time he got bit by a dog. Hands asks if Ledger brought the cure, so Ledger pulls out a syringe filled with green liquid. After injecting himself, Hands says he can finally walk around like a normal person. The moment the medicine enters his body, his beastly traits disappear. He knows he would have suffered much longer if Ledger hadn't helped him. Back when they first met, Ledger was sent to hunt a beast that turned out to be a giant chihuahua, and Hands would have been captured if he hadn't talked to him. Hands changes the subject and almost says Ledger's real name, but Ledger stops him immediately, reminding him that the letter mentioned name Ledger Chelsea. Hands asks why he chose to impersonate a professor, wondering how he ended up in this town after planning to meet in the capital. Hands says our guy is amazing for sneaking into the academy, and Ledger replies that it was his only choice. Hands asks if the real Ledger belonged to a secret society, and Ledger answers that he was a First Order, now dressed in regular clothes. Hands reflects on the fact that Ledger was a First Order executive. He clearly remembers those new figures showing up in the underworld, calling themselves the Order. Ledger asks for the exact name of the secret organization. Hands replies that they go by the Black Dawn Society, which makes perfect sense to Ledger. Hands mentions that he escaped by pure luck and that one tiny mistake could get him killed. Ledger agrees, promises to prepare, and asks for the briefcase he told Hands to bring. Hands hands over the sealed case, saying he would never be crazy enough to open it, adding that Sheridan must be waiting for him. Ledger points out that both of them end up relying on medicine. He then asks why Hands took so long to find him, since the report said he arrived 2 days ago, but Hands has no idea what he is talking about. Ledger mentions the werewolf sightings from 2 days ago, but Hands explains that he only got to the city today. A deep silence suddenly fills the area, and both of them notice a strange presence on the rooftops. To their shock, the two friends spot an actual, real werewolf standing under the full moon. They stare right at the monster, crouching on the roof above them. They are stunned to see that the beast actually exists. Hands points out that the monster hasn't noticed them yet and suggests escaping while they can. Ledger disagrees, saying it must be hunting for prey and will spot any sudden movement. That's when Ledger notices a collar around the werewolf's neck. He tells Hands that he needs to get a closer look, surprising his friend with his courage. Because of the collar, Ledger figures someone released it on purpose. Hands wondered who was behind this, so Ledger decided to investigate, grabbing his revolver as he prepared to move. Hands mentioned that it had been a long time since he last saw him use that gun back in his hunting days. He remembered that Ledger used to wear a mask back then, though he could not recall its appearance. Back in those days, he went by the name Abraham Van Helsing, a legendary vampire hunter. Spotting movement, the werewolf turned toward Ledger, who walked forward calmly with his hand in his pocket, showing no hostility. Chelsea appeared nearby. The drooling beast bared its fangs, looking vicious and hungry for blood. Suddenly, it vanished from the rooftop and leaped right in front of Ledger with full force. Its eyes glowed, its face looked brutal, and steam poured from its mouth. Seeing the collar up close raised even more questions for Ledger, but he knew he would get answers once he captured and interrogated it. Right then, the monster let out a loud howl. After howling, the creature slashed violently with its claws, trying to strike its target. Ludger dodged using a blue magic circle under his feet, which let him easily slip past every attack until the werewolf made one final lunge and crashed hard into a wall, leaving itself with nowhere to escape. The furious beast then charged directly at him at high speed. Ludger kept a completely calm expression and gave a slight smirk. The glowing blue magic circles he placed along the ground began to float into the air, expanding and unleashing a sharp wave of energy that struck the monster. The werewolf quickly collapsed to the ground, stunned by the magical shock wave it covered its ears with its claws, completely dazed and deafened by the impact. Watching from his hiding spot, Hans wondered what just happened to the beast. Ludger explained that he activated ultrasonic waves that normal humans could not hear. Holding a syringe, he mentioned there was no need to waste expensive silver bullets. Looking at the werewolf in pain, he planned to find out who created it, but right before he could give the injection, he heard the police approaching at the worst possible time. At that exact moment, the werewolf snapped out of its stunned state. The monster made a huge leap back onto the rooftop. Ludger used a hidden grappling hook under his sleeve to go after it. The metal hook grabbed onto the roof, and he used the chain to quickly climb up the building. From above, he spotted the creature running on all fours and escaping at high speed. Ludger watched closely, determined not to let the werewolf get away. Down below, the police spotted movement on the roofs and started looking for any suspicious people nearby. Meanwhile, Ludger kept up the chase across the rooftops. The beast ran ahead on all fours, but he was almost right on top of it. They kept leaping from roof to roof until the monster suddenly came to a stop, locking its glowing eyes right onto Ludger. They landed on top of a train inside the railway terminal, and the two of them faced off. Ludger mentioned that he only planned to knock the beast out, but now it left him no choice. As the creature got ready to charge again, Ludger threw his shuriken straight at it. The beast did not slow down at all, wildly dodging the blade with drool flying and glowing eyes fixed ahead. After dodging the attack, it rushed right at Ludger, who stood his metal star loops midair, slicing back down to strike the monster from behind. But the beast effortlessly dodges the weapon without even turning around. Snatching his weapon back, Ludger admits this creature has incredible reflexes. Gripping his cane tightly, he prepares to end the werewolf with his next strike. Pure blue magic energy crackles at the tip of his cane and fires forward. The blast surges toward the beast as Ludger weaves a rapid hand sign. Still clutching the cane, he watches the werewolf howl as the energy wave closes in. But the monster remains focused, instantly spotting Ludger's sudden, high-speed movement. Closing the distance instantly, Ludger unleashes a heavy blow while secretly prepping another attack. He whips another shuriken forward, and this one sinks deep into the werewolf's chest. As the beast roars in agony, Ludger vaults right over it to strike again. But the creature clamps its massive jaws onto his cane, stopping his momentum cold. That is when Ludger reveals his trump card, sliding a hidden blade from the cane. The werewolf stares in pure shock as the concealed steel slips free. Drawing his arm back, Ludger prepares to slice the monster in half. The beast can only watch as the blade flashes directly toward its eyes. With absolute precision, the edge cuts deep into the werewolf's skull, killing it instantly. Meanwhile, Hans sprints through the tight, twisting alleys of the city streets. Having narrowly avoided getting caught, he anxiously wonders when Ludger will return. Suddenly, a severed piece of the werewolf lands right at his feet. Hans recoils, gasping at the gruesome sight, just as Ludger steps out of the shadows. Ludger playfully asks if he scared him, but Hans snaps that a warning would be nice. Hans is offended that his partner nearly abandoned him out there in the cold. But Ludger calmly explains that he secured all the vital intel they needed. Hans then asks why he dragged the dead monster's head along with him. Ludger admits he wanted to shock him before closely examining the creature's flesh. He confirms this werewolf is actually an artificial cryptid born from dark experiments. He insists they stick to the plan, even though Hans remains highly skeptical. Ludger suggests they establish a base here, as it beats staying in the capital. Staying hidden in this city is their smartest play, but Hans is not convinced. He points out that Cernan is crawling with maniacs and shadowy, secret organizations. Ludger explains that any massive scene they make will bring unwanted heat. He tasks Hans with gathering information, leaving his friend feeling totally overwhelmed. Hans grumbles about doing it alone, but Ludger notes the Academy is watching closely. Since he cannot make any suspicious moves, Hans must be his eyes and ears. Keeping him updated will allow Ledger to strike when the moment is right. Hans reluctantly agrees, knowing that digging up secrets is his true specialty. Still, Ledger knows the path ahead is going to be incredibly rocky. For now, he must quietly build his strength behind the scenes. He highly doubts some minor street gang could create a beast like this. Not after he spotted a strange lab emblem stamped on the werewolf's collar. But for today, none of that matters. The threat is dead and buried. However, peace is short-lived. Whispers spread that the notorious killer is still active. 5 more bodies were discovered in the dark alleys of the city last Sunday. This brings the total victim count to 10, and yet nobody has a clue. But witnesses claim a beast in black fur did it, the police call. The attacker a lunatic, promising a swift arrest, but Ledger is left stunned. Reading the paper because he took down the werewolf on Saturday, not Sunday, he starts to wonder if there is actually another werewolf roaming around. Lithuval, deep inside Professor Ledger Chelsea's office, a mysterious glowing orb starts. Glowing with a strange blue light. Meanwhile, Serene Academy's elite professors gather for a massive meeting around a long table as Ledger enters the room. Professor Selena offers him a seat right beside her. The other faculty members whisper among themselves about Ledger, gossiping about his unique magic and his mysterious past. Selena quietly asks if he saw the news about 2 second-year students who were brutally attacked last night. Luckily, their injuries were not fatal, though they were severely scarred by deep claw marks. A student recalled waking up during the assault and seeing a terrifying beast towering right over them. Selena concludes that those earlier rumors were actually true and that the victims are indeed turning up in Lithu. Just then, another professor announces the headmistress has arrived, ordering the room to quiet down. Selena whispers that her name is Mary Ross, a pharmacology chief who has been at Serene for 20 years. The headmistress steps forward to share an urgent update with the faculty. She gets straight to the point, explaining that mysterious attacker has emerged right inside Serene. 2 students were brutally mauled last night by an unknown threat. However, witnesses reported spotting a black-furred werewolf. Instantly, one professor scoffs in utter disbelief, arguing that a cryptid invading the academy makes 0 sense. He turns to Professor Hugo Bortag to ask if he agrees. Hugo calmly notes that Serene sits under the protection of the Exilian Empire, meaning monsters simply cannot survive. Here, he refuses to believe that elite students are panicking over some silly urban legend. The headmistress reminds Hugo Bortag that this beast has already claimed 2 victims. Even so, the stubborn professor refuses to believe it is a monster, asking if the targets were nobles. Instead, Hugo suspects the real culprit is actually a commoner student from the academy. The headmistress cannot believe his arrogance, but Hugo keeps aggressively pushing his theory. Noting that only noble students have been targeted, he flatly refuses to accept the story of a wild werewolf on campus. Instead, he suspects someone is merely masquerading as a monster to commit these crimes. Meanwhile, Ledger thought the Black Dawn Society was on the ropes, but it turns out he was dead wrong. He watches with frustration as everyone turns on each other instead of working together. He starts to question if this is the sad reality of Serene, the most prestigious academy on the continent. Suddenly, a tiny insect lands on Ledger's shoulder. He studies it closely, trying to figure out what kind of creature just chose him as a landing pad. He pinches the bug and when he crushes it, a tiny piece of paper falls out. The message reveals that 3 test subjects have escaped, ordering him to either capture or liquidate them. If anyone else tracks them down first, his true identity will be exposed. Ledger quietly destroys the note, deeply frustrated by how his life is always plagued by endless trouble. Noticing his dark expression, Selena asks if he is. She expressed concern, but he quickly assured her that he was fine. He had never anticipated this entire situation would be connected to the Black Dawn Society. From the way things were unfolding, it seemed even they hadn't foreseen these strange events. The thought of his true identity being exposed left him profoundly shocked. He knew he couldn't simply do nothing, so he resolved to track down the beast before the organization did, because exposure meant everything was over for him. Meanwhile, back inside, the headmistress informed Hugo that he could think what he wished as long as he performed his duties. She then ordered nightly patrols and prohibited students from leaving their rooms after dark, stressing that anyone breaking this rule would face penalties. with all the professors in agreement, the headmistress brought the meeting to a. Outside, Ludger catches a faint sound behind him and orders them to step out immediately. A girl hiding behind a tree panics, caught red-handed by Ludger. He stares right at her, watching her stand there, nervous and shy behind the tree trunk. He realizes she is the exact same girl who approached him earlier and that she is currently disguised as a student, knowing exactly who she is. Ludger asks what she wants, making her stutter. He then tells her to follow him. She instantly complies, trailing behind him, looking shy and awkward. She asks if he likes coffee, leaving him bewildered. They head into a nearby cafe, take a seat, and order 2 coffees. When asked for her name, the girl introduces herself as Sadina Roshan. Ludger quickly notices that is not a commoner surname, so he demands her real identity. Trembling with anxiety, the girl insists that Sadina really is her actual name. Ludger finds it strange that she is not using an alias. He tells her to spit it out, since she must have urgent news if she followed him. He casts a spell that blocks sound around them, surprising her. Ludger asks her not to call him first order, and she immediately blames herself for the slip. He orders her not to use that title around anyone else, and she quickly nods in agreement. Getting back to business, he asks Sadina what she came to report. Sadina explains that the werewolf incident involves an affiliated organization. It was a cryptid experiment run by rogue mages at Shamsis Academy, a school full of outcasts exiled from society for their unethical experiments. Those test subjects escaped, and one of them fled through the sewers to surrender, leaving casualties behind. Ludger is stunned to hear this, prompting Sadina to apologize for rambling. She continues, explaining that while the organization handles the cleanup, there is a direct connection to Ludger. After all, he lent his name under orders from Victor Dreadful, another First Order. Ludger replies that he only lent his name and never expected things to spiral like this, adding that he had even forgotten about Victor. Sadina says they must track down and eliminate all 3 escaped experiments, but Ludger corrects her, stating there are only 2. He then presents the identification collar of the other werewolf, shocking Sadina. He explains that 2 days ago in Leth, he ran into one of those escaped experiments. From the lab, Ludger wonders how such a talented girl, who successfully infiltrated the academy as a student, is still stuck as a Third Order. He cannot believe the secret organization is keeping her on the sidelines, unless she chose it. Since she is a highborn noble, the anti-society faction likely despises her. They are likely using Sadina as a mere pawn, ready to discard her once she loses her value. Discarded once her usefulness ends. Meanwhile, Ludger recently noticed a glaring flaw inside Sarin Academy, and he never expected to find a matching crack in the secret Society of the Black Dawn. Perhaps this incident will give Ludger the leverage he needs over Sadina Roshan. Armed with the knowledge that the beasts emerged from the dark sewers, Roshan prepares to deploy more search squads down there. Ludger realizes that Sarin Academy is still completely in the dark. Sadina confirms this, though she admits their ignorance won't last long. Ludger tells her that after listening to her report, he hopes they can meet again if the opportunity arises. He even mentions that her explanation was far more impressive than the messy explanation she gave during their very first encounter. Offering that final compliment, Ludger dispels the barrier, stands, and exits the cafe. Sadina is left glowing, deeply touched by praise from a First Order member. Meanwhile, a watchful eye outside notices that Ludger was casting spells inside the building. Flora wonders what kind of conversation requires a privacy barrier, questioning who they really are. Later in class, Flora Lumos remains deeply distracted, her mind racing over the suspicious meeting. She vividly recalls the spell she witnessed through the cafe glass, based on its distinct hue. It was definitely a soundproofing barrier. Normal eyes cannot see the color of magic. But Flora is unique. She can perceive it all. Why did they need such secrecy? What dark secrets were they discussing in that booth? She desperately wants to know. Up front, the professor dismisses the class, strictly warning everyone to ignore the wild rumors and promising harsh punishment for anyone spreading them. Naturally, the students immediately start whispering about the rumored werewolf. Some even hatch a wild plan to hunt the beast down. A voice of reason reminds them of the warning, saying anyone caught will face severe consequences. Still, they scheme, figuring they can secure the city reward if they remain stealthy. Claiming the city bounty, Leo asks Aiden for his thoughts, but Aiden prefers to stay completely out of danger. Leo expected this cowardly response from his companion, asking what he will do instead. Aiden firmly refuses to engage, pointing out that people are getting hurt and the academy professors are already handling it. Suddenly, a fiery, red-haired girl slams her palms onto their table, demanding attention. Aiden greets the girl, Tessie, with a polite good morning, but she remains irritated and completely ignores him. Leo tells her she lost their duel and should accept it, but Tessie fiercely claims it was a tie. She barks at Leo to back off, demanding a full-power rematch with Aiden. Aiden declines, citing his afternoon classes and pointing out the looming threat of the werewolf. Tessie snaps that those are just pathetic excuses because he is terrified of her. Tired of arguing, Aiden simply sighs and admits that fear is his main reason. Tessie immediately proposes a different way to settle their ongoing rivalry. Intrigued, Aiden asks what she has in mind. She declares that whoever captures the rampaging werewolf first will be declared the ultimate winner. Leo eagerly accepts the challenge on Aiden's behalf, leaving his friend utterly stunned. Tessie warns Aiden not to chicken out, while Leo jokingly tells him not to cry after losing. Once Tessie departs, their bespectacled friend asks Leo why on earth he agreed to such a dangerous deal. Leo explains that the academy instructors will inevitably capture the beast first anyway. Yet Aiden remains unsettled by her intense determination, though Leo doubts she will actually attempt it. Alone, Aiden knows Tessie will actually go through with her plan because she is reckless and stubborn. They weigh the possibility that she truly intends to hunt the beast and stand up to check. Spotting Tessie outside, they assume she is just walking back to her dorm, feeling relieved that she is not foolish enough to go after the beast, until she suddenly changes direction. Watching her determined stride, they realize she is indeed going after the beast. Night falls over Saren Academy, and Ludger Cherish walks through the streets fully aware of the countless eyes watching him. Hugo had asked him to stay close to the noble students and go easy on them. Ludger figures Hugo must be truly desperate to plead with a fallen noble like himself. Argues that siding with the headmistress simply makes more sense. Ludger declares that at Theon there are no nobles or commoners, as that is his primary rule. When he turns to patrol, Professor Hugo calls out to him. Ludger knows that teaming up with Hugo might expose his fake family background. Besides, he has absolutely no reason to defy the headmistress. Either way, Ludger senses something off nearby, and checking a bush, he catches a few students spying on him. He asks if they forgot they must stay in their dorms, and when they try to make excuses, he docks 5 points. He realizes at least 20 students are already out hunting the werewolf bounty, making individual punishments pointless. Knowing things will only get worse, he decides to hunt the beast himself before more students get involved. Ludger heads toward the sewage treatment facility near Theon. Using the sewer map Sedna gave him, he navigates the area. Ludger locates the exact water pipe the beast slipped through, channeling magic from his cane to light up the area. He confirms no one else has been here. Suddenly, he spots the footprints of 2 werewolves on the ground. One is massive while the other is smaller, both moving in the exact same direction. Following the tracks, he reaches a broken iron gate deeper in the sewers. Examining the area closely, he realizes that from this exact spot, the 2 beasts split up. He notices the larger one headed toward the academy, likely to hunt. He knows this beast is highly aggressive and could strike an innocent student at any moment. Suddenly, Ludger hears a sharp, terrifying scream echo in the distance. He immediately sprints toward the sound, abandoning the tracks because following them would take far too long. Arriving at the scene, he spots a dark werewolf cornering 2 academy students. Seeing them in mortal danger, he decides to act directly, something he usually avoids. He rushes forward, casting a spell. Through his cane, a vibrant orange magic circle flashes, firing directly at the beast. Caught off guard, the werewolf tries to shield itself with its massive arms, but the impact blows the monster away. Ludger steps in to protect the shaken students collapsed on the ground. The girls recognize Professor Ludger, and he instantly recognizes Lynn and a Lindell Exilian. He calls out to them, and the second they respond, he deducts 5 points each, leaving them utterly dumbfounded. Lindell immediately snaps back, demanding to know why he didn't check on them first, but Ludger asks if she is raising her voice because she thinks she did a good job. He adds that the drug way too harsh for someone who cannot even defend herself. She begs him to lift Lynn's punishment instead, explaining she had simply fallen asleep. While studying, but before she can finish, Ludger snaps that she should have considered the risks. That is when Ellen notices a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Ludger orders her back to the dorms to look after Lynn, promising to lift their punishments if they comply. Noting her downcast expression, he warns her that next time the penalty stands. Suddenly, the werewolf gets back up, growling viciously at the professor. The girls scream a warning that the beast is up. But he already knows. Thick smoke rises from the creature's body, showing that magic only delivered a minor scratch. The werewolf spins and bolts so Ludger immediately gives chase. He orders the two girls to clear out of the area and get to safety. Ludger pursues the fleeing beast at breakneck speed. The monster claws its way up the walls, leaping onto the academy rooftops. Ludger fires his grappling wire again, hauling himself up after the beast. Lynn watches the professor gliding effortlessly across the rooftops. Realizing that he is casting a levitation spell, she stands amazed. High above, the two combatants face off near the towers. Ready to clash, they blur across the rooftops in a frantic zigzag pattern. Trading blows at the exact same time, they clash relentlessly without pause. As they leap between buildings, slowly descending to the ground, werewolf lunges wildly at Ludger. It swipes its razor-sharp claws at him and gets dangerously close, but Ludger slips the blow and counters instantly with a snappy spell that strikes the beast dead on. Right after that, he leaps over the dazed monster. Floating midair, he prepares another spell that glows an intense blue. Below, the two students watch in awe, witnessing how a real mage battles in real life-and-death combat. The furious beast swings again with a blinding rush and a brutal swipe. Before the blow lands, Ludger prepares another spell using his staff. A beam of azure energy fires straight into the beast's chest, hitting it with massive force. The impact blows it off the roof, but it digs its sharp claws into the ledge to save itself. As the creature struggles to pull itself back up, Ludger channels yet another spell to finish it off. A magic circle flashes, firing two energy bolts that strike the beast and send it plummeting off the structure. Ludger watches from above as the monster slides down and falls heavily toward the ground. He begins to feel the fatigue, realizing that burning through this much mana is incredibly reckless. The problem is he cannot fight using physical skills while his students are watching him. He wants to end this skirmish quickly, but a jolt of surprise hits him as the beast keeps moving down. Below, the monster tears a massive chunk of concrete from the roof, hurling it directly at Ludger, giving him almost no time to react. Relying on pure instinct, he summons a barrier, blocking the flying debris just in time. Ludger finds it startling that the werewolf is intelligent enough to use objects as weapons. In combat, the beast leaps, crashing into the stone tiles with terrifying force. It misses Ludger entirely, merely shattering the stone floor while leaving him unscathed. Even so, he is deeply impressed by the way it exploits the terrain. A monster mutated from a mere wolf should not possess human-level intelligence, forcing Ludger to wonder if this creature is even a werewolf at all. Meanwhile, Aiden and Leo call out for Tessie deep in the woods. Leo wants to give up, convinced they will never find her. He figures she'll just make her own way back. Aiden disagrees. They agreed to her plan, making them responsible. Leo then wonders if Tessie is tracking the werewolf too. Aiden can only guess, but he is sure Tessie would. Leo decides they will search for another 30 minutes, and if she is not found, they head back. Just as those words leave his mouth, a loud scream echoes through the forest. Instantly recognizing Tessie's voice, they bolt in the direction of the sound. They tear through the dense woods surrounding Soren Academy. Suddenly, Aiden spots something strange in the brush and abruptly loses his footing. He collapses. Leo rushes over to find his friend writhing in pain. A severe headache grips him. Right then, they stumble upon Tessie, who had also tripped after colliding with Aiden. Confused, she demands answers. He mentions hearing her scream, but she insists she did no such thing. Silenced by a sudden noise, Tessie motions for them to quietly follow her. The three students creep toward a nearby bush to investigate the noise. Hidden beneath a mound of leaves, they discover a tiny werewolf pup. Tessie smugly claims victory in their bet, but Leo points out a flaw. She only found the beast, she did not capture it. Before she moves, Aiden intervenes, pointing out that this wounded cub is hiding in isolation. A creature this tiny could not have caused all the chaos, especially being injured. Tessie asks if a second werewolf is lurking nearby. Aiden cannot say, but he realizes someone has been nursing the cub. Suddenly, he catches a glint of something shiny tangled in its fur. It is a chain. As they lean in, a massive werewolf towers behind them. Hot breath escapes its drooling maw, exposing rows of razor-sharp fangs. Leo instantly senses the beast's presence and yells a warning to Aiden. As the giant monster lunges to strike, Leo shoves Aiden out of harm's way. Taking the full force of the blow himself, Leo is sent flying. Tessie stares in absolute shock as she realizes this is a genuine werewolf. Drawing her wand, she resolves to defeat the monster and restore her family honor. But a momentary distraction gives the beast an opening. It swings its deadly claws, but Aiden leaps forward to shield her. She is stunned as he tackles her away from the lethal swipe. Hurt, Leo screams for Aiden, who is instead checking if Tessie is left unharmed. She asks why he saved her, and he simply tells her he protects his friends. Meanwhile, the raging monster remains hostile, poised to slaughter them all. Aiden realizes the creature is only lashing out to protect its wounded pup. He tries to soothe it, but Tessie warns that the beast cannot comprehend. Regardless, Aiden loudly promises that he will not harm the cub. Hearing this, the massive beast pauses instead of lunging forward. Its wild fury begins to fade as the predator stands still. Aiden explains the beast was only acting out of parental instinct. His friends remain skeptical, but Aiden begs them to trust him. Aiden steps forward, gesturing to the beast to reassure it that everything is fine. He promises not to hurt the creature, offering a remedy for the young werewolf. The beast seems to understand, gently reaching out its hand for the medicine. But before it can take the vial, a sudden spell strikes the creature. The relentless magic expands rapidly, injuring the helpless werewolf without mercy. It binds the creature's arms, forming a tight prison that restrains it. Professor Ledger suddenly appears, demanding to know what the three students are doing. As the werewolf struggles, Tessie panics and screams at the sight of him. The professor coldly warns them that they will explain their actions later. But Aiden steps forward, begging Professor Ledger to wait just a moment. He explains the beast understands them, pleading with him to reconsider before killing. Ledger scoffs, asking what kind of nonsense the boy is spewing right now. Aiden suggests the werewolf might actually be human, but his plea is cut short. Ledger glares at him with deep disapproval and roughly shoves him aside. The professor's dark, menacing expression terrifies the young student. Raising his staff, Ledger unleashes a fierce fire spell directly at the creature. As flames engulf the beast, the professor stands cold, his back turned. He warns that Aiden will be held accountable for this reckless behavior. Aiden can only stare at the blazing fire in absolute terror and helplessness. Ledger orders them back to their dorms before dawn, leaving them feeling miserable. Tessie watches Aiden, noting the deep, silent sadness in his distant eyes. Suddenly, the headmistress enters the room and asks if they have waited long. Startled, the trio is shocked to face the supreme headmistress of Sorrent. Her rare presence clearly signals that this is no ordinary disciplinary meeting. When asked for their thoughts, they worry it means more than lost points. Ledger confirms their fears, reminding them of how incredibly reckless they were. He warns that a single mistake could have easily gotten them killed. However, the headmistress gently steps in, telling them not to despair completely. She tells them it is not the end of the world, asking Ledger to ease up. But Ledger quickly protests, arguing that they cannot overlook such dangerous behavior. Even though the headmistress points out that everything turned out fine, Ledger insists this is not something they can simply brush aside. Turning to Aiden, she asks if he truly risked his life to save Tessie. The direct question leaves the young student feeling incredibly embarrassed. For their reckless rules violation, she docks the trio 10 penalty points. But she awards them 20 merit points for their brave, desperate actions. The shocking twist leaves all three of them completely stunned and overjoyed. When Ledger reluctantly agrees with the decision, she tells them to keep working hard. The relieved students offer their sincere thanks to the kind headmistress. Aiden silently watches Ledger, wondering if the harsh professor is finally satisfied. Later, the headmistress admits she did not expect Ledger to request this meeting. He explains that dealing with them directly would damage his strict reputation. Understanding his pride, she asks if he noticed anything strange about the werewolf. But the professor lies, claiming he noticed absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Accepting his answer, she concludes there is nothing left for them to investigate. She commends Ledger for preventing any casualties, adding that she looks forward to his future achievements. Later, Ludger sits alone in his office, reflecting on the situation. Recalls the werewolf pup. He remembers that its body was actually human, never having fully transformed into a beast. The monsters who created these creatures didn't use wolves as a base. They kidnapped regular humans and turned them into beasts. Still, Ludger has no regrets about eliminating them, because he would have been in danger otherwise. Besides, those monsters harmed innocent people, and that fact never changes. That is why they had to die. Still, the image of that pup trying to protect its father still haunts his mind. The professor pulls a glowing communication orb from his coat to contact his friend Hans, asking him for a favor. Meanwhile, the classmates discuss their merit points. Tessie asks if Leo's injured arm is doing better, and he says it will heal up in just a few days. Noticing Aiden's odd look, she asks if something is bothering him. Aiden brushes it off at first, but then mentions the bizarre collar that was clamped around the pup's neck yesterday. Tessie gasps in shock at this revelation, making Leo quickly tell her to keep her voice down. That explains why Aiden tried to stop the professor, sensing a high probability that these creatures were artificially created. Leo recalls bizarre rumors about strange figures hiding in Sarin, and while he cannot confirm the truth, he agrees it is indeed highly unusual for a wild werewolf to wear a collar. The group then discusses Ludger and the piercing look he gave Aiden last night. Aiden remains convinced that Professor Ludger definitely saw something back then. Tessie asks if he is hiding some secret, and Leo agrees the teacher must know more. Still, Leo prefers to write it off as overthinking, believing an academy instructor wouldn't keep such a massive secret. Even so, he cannot fully rule out the possibility that Ludger is connected to the shadowy organization from those rumors. Tessie tells them they are overthinking, reminding them of the headmistress's own words. She points out that Ludger gave the headmistress all the necessary details, so there would be no reason to trust him if he were truly suspicious. Even though he acts cold, Tessie is convinced Ludger genuinely cared for and protected them. Regardless, both Leo and Aiden maintain their doubts about Professor Ludger. Eventually, Aiden concedes that they should drop the subject for now, admitting he is starving and suggesting they grab some lunch. When he asks Tessie to tag along, her overly enthusiastic response completely catches him off guard. She says grabbing a meal together is exactly what friends do. When Aiden happily agrees, she blushes furiously. Thrilled, she happily tags along, which gets Aiden pumped up as well. Elsewhere, Hans asks if Ludger reviewed the scent files, and the professor confirms he has. The intelligence details missing citizens from Lethavik and the key locations where shady groups congregate. Some high-profile targets were spotted near an abandoned factory, making Hans believe that is their hideout. He uncovered that labor workers vanished just outside the city, prompting Ludger to ask if a family of 3 was listed. Hans confirms their entire household disappeared. Hearing this, Ludger decides to investigate the suspicious area. As darkness blanketed the city's old industrial sector, 2 sentries complain about their boring shift, wondering how much longer they must remain stationed there. They also wonder how their captives managed to escape and who was running things back then. One explains that the kidnapped boy wasn't drugged properly, thrashing around when they tried to pump him with more chemicals. They never expected his parents to react like that. Still, one of them wonders if parents even care after turning into werewolves. The other guy confirms they absolutely do, which is why they broke out and went wild. They conclude that this entire mess is all the kid's fault. Suddenly, the 2 men hear footsteps echoing down the tunnel. They lock eyes and reach for their weapons, but before they can react, someone drops them instantly. They collapse dead onto the stone, and heavy footsteps echo through the sewer as Ludger emerges. He is cloaked in dark clothes, concealing his face with a hood and a mask. Before setting off, Hans had questioned Ludger about his gear. Hans asked if he was heading in alone, offering to back him up against some enemies. But Ludger insisted on going solo. This was even after Hans warned him that 40 armed guards were ready to move, including 2 powerful mages. Hans then pointed out a sewer grate where Ludger could slip inside unseen. Before departing, Ludger asked Hans about that family from earlier, specifically questioning him about the age of the couple's little boy. Hans told him the kid is 7 years old. Ludger feels a heavy wave of guilt for what happened. Refocusing on his mission inside the Black Dawn Society hideout, he pushes deeper into the enemy base. Along The way he crosses paths with more guards, and the brutal noises confirm he silences them. Moving through a long, shadowy corridor, Ledger leaves a grim trail of corpses. Suddenly, a mechanical bee buzzes out of a body, watching the grim scene with an eerie focus. Elsewhere, several cult workers carry heavy crates back and forth. Two guards spot an intruder in the facility and assume he belongs to the security squad, monitoring the threat through the bee. One of them realizes this mysterious intruder isn't with security. Still, they view this as a perfect opportunity, since nobody will ask questions if they wipe him out. Meanwhile, other goons scream to open fire on the intruder and unleash a hail of bullets, but a glowing mana barrier protects Ledger, leaving the attackers completely stunned. As they realize he's a mage, they instantly command the guns to be holstered and swords to be drawn. Ledger pulls out his own firearm, but the guards mock him, boasting that inside the silent zone, guns are completely useless. Before they can even register the threat, Ledger has already dropped one of their allies. It turns out the bullet he fired was charged with spellcraft, letting it bypass the zone's nullifying effect. The surviving goons realize his ammunition is packed with raw mana. Terrified for their lives, they scramble to escape until a heavily armored juggernaut carrying a massive weapon steps forward to intervene. This giant boasts that if Ledger takes a single hit from his high-tech bazooka-like weapon, he is completely finished. Laughing, the heavy guard unleashes a devastating laser blast right at Ledger. However, he freezes in absolute disbelief when he watches the mage block the strike with a shield. He realizes that this magic has metallic properties combined with alchemy, knowing his high-voltage electricity should easily work due to the metal. He readies another lethal blast, but before he can fire, mana-infused bullet from Ledger's gun screams through the air, piercing the energy tube on the armored soldier recoils in shock, watching as raw energy surges through the metal tube and spreads, inflicting agonizing pain on the nearby henchman. With a single spell, Ledger has already wiped out nearly 10 men at once. Looking upward, Ledger senses a strange presence and quickly shoots at the ceiling, bringing down a single bee. He realizes he was being watched by an insect, confirming his suspicion that someone is tracking him. Ledger wonders if this is the work of those infamous underworld siblings who specialize in insect-based espionage. He briefly debates whether to wipe out every insect first. Suddenly, he stomps his foot, unleashing magical shockwaves that ripple outward and strike the flying swarm. The moment the invisible waves hit them, the bees drop dead, falling lifelessly to the cold floor. The insect handler, watching through their eyes, realizes he has suddenly lost his connection to his tiny spies. Right before the bugs died, he detected high-frequency sound waves and vibrations that shattered them. He deduces that Ledger's magic manipulates metal and wind, making him a deadly threat. Knowing small flying insects cannot handle heavy winds, he decides to release a massive beast. Instead, he orders a bald thug named Vang to get ready, and Vang gets prepared. Everyone braces for impact, expecting the intruder to break through the door at any second, but as they hold their breath, the lights suddenly go out. The two leaders assume the intruder cut the power to play mind games with them. The blonde smuggler grows uneasy when Vaughn stays silent and calls out to him, only to find Vaughn's decapitated body standing perfectly still. The bald man's head is rolling on the floor, and his partner panics the instant he sees it. Terror strikes him. The intruder slipped inside the second the lights died, so he scrambles to strike before he becomes the next victim. At that moment, a giant centipede crawls out from his sleeve and lunges off his arm. Desperate criminal suddenly spots the hooded, masked invader standing quietly behind him. Ledger calmly raises his cane, aiming a strike directly at the man. The criminal wonders why a mage is fighting up close, desperately trying to retreat to safety. But that is when Ledger casts a spell. The blonde man watches in horror as floating flames materialize, completely freezing in place. His terror deepens when he realizes how rapidly the spell was cast. Before he can even flinch, the magic erupts, sending searing fire rushing directly toward his screaming figure. The blast hits him hard, and the force blasts him backward. The remaining henchmen watch in sheer disbelief as this intruder breaks in and easily overpowers their leader. The boss groans in pain, demanding to know the identity of his attacker, while Ledger calmly draws a weapon and aims it at him. Sudden gunshot echoes through the room, leaving the henchmen paralyzed with fear as they wonder how this man crushed the feared insect brothers so effortlessly. when Ludger turns. His gaze toward them, his freezing, ruthless eyes strike absolute terror into their souls. Suddenly, a lethal surprise attack lunges directly at Ludger, who notices the danger just in time to leap backward. A gigantic insect leg slices violently through the empty air where he stood only a second ago, seemingly erupting straight from Vaughn's lifeless body. Even without a head, the corpse twitches, wielding a mutated monstrous insect appendage. It actually speaks. The grotesque mouth splits open on the palm of Vaughn's hand, whining about the pain. It expresses disbelief at being ambushed and defeated so easily. Ludger asks if the creature is in. The insect monster somehow keeps talking, even without the top half of its body. The beast boasts its form is beyond human limits, as something starts bursting from its stomach. A deafening noise echoes through the room as a massive shadow looms right before Ludger, forcing him on high guard. Massive green leg slams heavily onto the floor. A colossal, bug-like beast emerges right in front of Ludger with murderous intent, claiming it doesn't mourn the death of its younger brother. Every subordinate screams in terror and scrambles to run away as fast as possible. The giant insect begins thrashing wildly, sending several henchmen flying with brutal strikes. It keeps attacking without pause, while Ludger dodges, asking if the beast even cares about its own followers at all. Ludger instantly draws his magic gun and fires rapidly at the beast, but the bullets bounce harmlessly off its armored shell. The monstrous insect swings a massive leg in a heavy counterattack. Ludger quickly dodges backward and begins weaving another spell. As he summons flickering flames, the massive centipede monster swiftly leaps to the side. Ludger is stunned that it can dodge so fast despite its colossal size. The beast instantly lunges to seize him, trapping him in its razor-sharp claws. Stuck in its grip, Ludger unleashes another spell to break free. This time, he blasts the giant centipede head-on with roaring flames, but when the smoke clears, its armored face and sharp fangs are entirely unscathed. Ludger cannot believe the monster took 0 damage from a point-blank blast. Suddenly, the beast hurls our protagonist across the room. It sneers that he needs at least a level 4 spell if he hopes to burn it. The beast roars, swinging its legs to crush the spot where Ludger just stood, but as its claw slams into the wall, it realizes Ludger has vanished, leaving only a massive hole behind. In the wall, the winged monster scans the area, unable to believe he just vanished. Then it realizes that Ludger is lurking right above them, clinging to the ceiling, and strikes a pillar to bring him crashing down. The column supporting the ceiling cracks, collapsing right in front of the beast, but Ludger swiftly dodges behind it. The creature notes that the young mage is fast, just like its own swarming bugs. Ludger realizes that weapons and third-tier magic are useless, and the beast won't grant him the time to cast a 4th-tier spell. With a serious look, Ludger admits he didn't want to resort to this. The beast senses an ominous shift, and Ludger says there is no other choice as he begins incanting his spell. Meanwhile, outside, Hans shivers in the freezing air, wishing he had brought a coat. He figures the fight should be wrapping up, knowing how brutal it is to face 2 dark mages. Glancing toward the factory, Hans notices a blinding radiance piercing from within. Colossal flash of light and a violent shockwave blow out from the building. Watching the entire factory catch fire, Hans realizes Ludger resorted to his ultimate option, true magic. Hans considers any devastating spell as true magic and wonders exactly what kind of spell he just witnessed. Ludger returns, and Hans asks what happened. Ludger calmly tells him he took care of everything, including the test subjects. Hans asks if there was any way to save them, but Ludger says it was impossible, which is why he had to eliminate them. They confirm the drug transforms humans, and Hans suspects a secret sponsor is backing the operation. Ludger tells Hans to calm down, since he has already identified the culprit behind the experiment. Hans is shocked that Ludger already knows the mastermind behind it. All realizing he cannot stop his friend, Hans relents and heads to the hideout. First, Ludger remains behind alone as the facility burns to ashes. Meanwhile, lavish banquet elsewhere, an arrogant nobleman hurls a plate at a servant. He spits curses at his maid, declaring she is unworthy of even eating his food. The old aristocrat berates all his servants for their poor upbringing. Furious, he rises from the table, loudly complaining about his incompetent staff. He considers the massive fortune wasted on experimental subjects that were not properly secured. He has no clue who was at fault, but he hopes they were dealt with. Either way, the final lab results are close, and they will soon be in his His goal is for this miracle drug to restore his body to peak condition. He wants to reclaim his youth and become stronger than ever. This substance will restore the youth he sacrificed to build his massive fortune. Out on the old noble's balcony, a masked Ledger confronts Belelfort Rickon. The noble demands to know his identity, only to be slammed to the ground and pinned immediately. The old man screams loudly for his guards, but Ledger warns him. They are not coming, having already sealed the room with a soundproof barrier. Ledger then asks a chilling question, taking us back to that 7-year-old child who was transformed into a monster alongside his parents. That kid actually smiled at his executioner, looking almost grateful. Ledger asks the old noble how he thinks that executioner felt in that moment. Pinned to the floor, the old man chuckles, realizing Ledger was the one who put down his test subjects. Belelfort quickly claims this is all a huge misunderstanding and begs him to talk things over. He tells Ledger not to feel guilty about killing them, calling those test subjects worthless garbage nobody cared about. He insists he merely gave miserable wretches a second chance to help humanity evolve. Asking if that isn't a noble sacrifice, Ledger cuts him off, saying that answer was more than enough. He slams the syringe into the old man. Belelfort shrieks in absolute terror, realizing what is about to happen to him. Since his response was enough, Ledger does not even bother showing any anger. Enraged, the old man demands to know what Ledger injected. Ledger calmly explains that according to lab records, even a tiny dose of this turns humans into werewolves. He wonders what happens with an entire bottle. Instantly, the old noble on the floor starts screaming in agony. He mutates into a monstrous, hairy beast with massive fangs and claws. The masked man warns that since this monster will never feel the agonizing pain those felt, he will force him to suffer the exact same way. Deafening crashes echo. Hearing the chaos coming from Lord Belelfort's private chambers, guards run inside. The men in suits kick the door open, confront the beast, and demand to know where the hell it came from, preparing to take it down using magic from their wands, ordering anyone without magic to search for the missing noble. Totally unaware this beast is actually their master, the wizards blast the creature with heavy fire magic, doubling down when they realize it survived the attack. Outside, a man wonders about the racket. He grabs his tools and quickly hides the rest of his gear. He asks if the place is a secret hideout and suggests taking a look around, but the figure in the black cloak tells him not to worry. He promises to return with the perfect cover to operate in the shady criminal underworld. His partner urges Hyung to rest up. Soon, the mysterious hero wanders through the quiet streets, observing the city lights and clenching his fists toward the gloomy horizon. Nobody believes the wealthy Lord Rickon was devoured by a vile monster. When the guards finally arrived, they only found the beast. It was so resilient that local mages spent a full hour burning the creature to ashes, sparking rumors of dark magic. Soon, reporters gasp in shock as a flashily dressed group makes an entrance. They are the security department and the legendary Nightcrawler Knights, led by Commander and Border Guardian Tina Lionhall. Their arrival clearly means serious trouble, and now desperate journalists scramble for any inside scoop. Torina demands the front gates be opened immediately. The guard protests but ultimately ends up obeying and clearing their path. Tina and her subordinates enter the mansion where Inspector Teberan welcomes her warmly. She briefly thanks him and demands the collected evidence. Since the elite security department is running the investigation, Teberan complies immediately. The squad begins to thoroughly analyze the crime scene. The assistant Inya apologizes to the veteran Lloyd for skipping honorifics, though she argues that formalities are useless when they are alone, but Lloyd snaps back that they must uphold the order's dignity at all costs. Tina steps in and explains that those rules only apply in front of strangers. She reminds them their priority is examining the burned remains and the late Lord's shady connections to dark magic and monsters. Lloyd agrees that witness accounts of the beast swallowing the wealthy Rickon make perfect sense. While Inya studies the charred corpse, the rest decide to search the room. Terina lifts a framed painting and notices the surrounding wallpaper is completely unstained. The investigators discover a hidden, empty wall safe. It is the perfect size to hide illicit funds. A clean, dust-free spot on the floor reveals that a safe stood there until last night, linking the tragic death directly to the stolen safe. The entire scenario is far too orchestrated to be a coincidence. A mastermind planned this clean heist. Tina wonders who could have executed Such a scheme, recalling the cloaked figure, she suspects it is Arsène Lupin, but she keeps that thought completely private. Turning to Lloyd, she asks if other unusual incidents occurred in the city. The veteran reports an abandoned factory, burned down at the exact same hour. Convinced there is something hidden there, she guides her squad to the ruins. Meanwhile, the young hero wakes up with a terrible headache, a severe side effect of magic that drains too much mana. Feeling exhausted just by breathing, he would be in deep trouble without his special medicine. He reasons he can finally stop worrying about the werewolf incident. After all, he had already burned the evidence to ashes, yet a lingering trace remains because he spared young Aiden. The way the boy tried to stop him from handling the beast until the very end was highly suspicious, since he stood right there when the flames consumed everything. If the boy saw anything, he must be eliminated. There is no guarantee the student will stay quiet about what happened. The Ludger considers getting rid of the boy, but decides against it when he recalls him standing before the werewolf, insisting he would never hurt the creature. Puzzled by that memory, he realizes that taking out a special student under the principal's watchful eye is far too risky, drawing too much attention. Instead, he focuses on recovering his strength, determined to fully investigate the strange man who claimed he learned his magic from a mysterious traveler. Meanwhile, the investigation team reaches the factory, finding it completely reduced to ash. With the search compromised, Terina suspects that dark mages and lycanthropes were conducting research inside the facility, while it was active, then set the blaze to destroy all evidence. With so many crises unfolding right after Belfort's death, she quickly rules out mere coincidence, determined to learn who else knew about this laboratory. She presses Lloyd for any recent cases, and he mentions a werewolf that terrorized Soren Academy after invading through the sewer pipes. The veteran officer reports that the beast mauled 3 students before being slain by a professor, noting that the creature's corpse was completely turned to ash. Hearing this beside the ruined factory, Terina rejects Lloyd's proposal to rush to the academy, choosing instead to focus on gathering clues at the crime scene. Connecting these two events simply because of fire seems rushed, but she keeps the theory alive to neutralize any threat to the Empire, honoring the sworn duty of the Nightcrawlers. Meanwhile, rumors circulate about how easily Ludger dispatched the beast thanks to his military background hunting such monsters. Meanwhile, at Soren Academy, a girl enters the classroom but cannot find anywhere to sit, as the students in the center refuse to clear a desk. The classmates actively avoid her after the chaos, leaving just one empty chair beside Ellen. Her Highness greets her warmly, but the young girl replies cautiously. Fully aware of the rumors a commoner sitting there will trigger, lie takes her seat, flashing back to last night when they both witnessed the professor hunting monsters. She worries for his safety despite his formidable strength. Just before class, Elendel questions her classmates' sudden lateness, asking why no one woke her, and joking about scolding the librarian. Line sheepishly blames her own oversleeping, while her Highness explains she was busy guiding students back to the dorms. Elendel then asks to be called Senior, insisting that everyone is equal at Soren. Still, Line remains tense, shocked to receive such direct assistance from royalty so casually. At that moment, Ludger sweeps in to begin the lecture. The cold professor introduces the elemental property conjuration specialty, renowned as the most vital and popular course in the 4 major magical disciplines, promising to teach the core concepts alongside a brand new technique. A blue-haired girl asks what this method entails, and Ludger explains that his system can boost the element's power by 20 to 80%. Naturally, the class is highly skeptical. He asks Anthony which magical elements he can control, and Anthony replies, water, ice, and sometimes plants. The professor commands him to manifest his strongest element. The young boy proudly created an ice cube, but the professor deemed the result mediocre and insignificant, which disheartened the student. Next, Professor Ludger asked the class to observe as he swiftly condensed a large sphere of ice into a perfect snowflake. The students quietly wondered if the professor had used the same amount of mana given the vast difference in efficiency. Noticing their interest, Ludger decided to elaborate on the basic theory, capturing Flora's attention. He explained that specializations had a long and foundational history in all magic, contrasting the simplicity of the 4 fundamental elements with the more than 10 complex attributes known today. The professor then offered 5 points to anyone who could explain magic's evolution, specifically using fire as an example. He rejected answers about lighting up the dark or clearing space in forests. He also scoffs at the idea of freeing humanity from the fear of darkness. Flora raises her hand, declaring that the original goal was to burn people to ashes, and Ledger calmly confirms this, explaining that burning, drowning, slicing, and causing earthquakes in battle were the real drivers behind advancing these magic skills. The elemental magic adapted to human needs, like surviving freezing temperatures or spinning massive water wheels and providing basic light, keeping this concept in mind. Let's watch the class begin the practical task of shaping their elemental spheres. Ledger instructs the students to focus on their mana flow, privately thinking it is pathetic for second-year students to be so incredibly untalented. He directs Anae to imagine vibrant sprouting buds, since her current plant magic resembles dead, rotting leaves. Next, he looks over at Aiden and notices he isn't materializing anything. This makes his friend ask what is going on as the professor stops before the boy. He internally questions the lack of results, ruling out any personal grudges or even lingering side effects from that werewolf incident. When asked about his elemental affinity, Aiden admits he can't express it. Ledger thinks it is completely unacceptable for a special student at Soren to fail the absolute basics. But he refuses to leave him behind, knowing the boy already mastered fire, water, and wind. The teacher decides to teach him how to use the flame attribute. The professor instructs Aiden to concentrate his mana and convert it into elemental power, imagining the raw traits of fire through his senses. The young boy concentrates on using his 5 senses, remembering the glow, sound, and shape of a flame inside a clay jar 8 years ago. He remembers a snowy day, the distinct smell of firewood and stew, his sisters crying, and his father smiling warmly as he arrived home, remembering the biting cold through his worn clothes and the cozy fireplace warmth. Aiden successfully conjures flames in his hand. He celebrates this victory built on deep memories. The instructor praises the flawless execution, noting it is a gentle warmth rather than a destructive force. Reflecting the student's unique memories and inner mana, Aiden's friend urges him never to forget that feeling. Ledger explains that this is the technique he teaches using strong memories and feelings, since even children easily understand simple concepts like hot and cold. The class notices the sheer power of this technique, but Flora refuses to join the others since she already knows the theory. She sees no real benefit in this approach, finding all the extra attention given to Aiden rather strange. Determined, let's watch as the eager girl unleashes a bizarre and volatile spell. She fuses ice and wind, whipping up a dangerous crystal vortex. The swirling energy turns unstable, prompting her panicked friend to shout. Sensing an imminent explosion, Flora screams at everyone to run away. Squeezing her eyes shut, she braces for impact. Suddenly, Ledger steps in. He slams his hand over the magic, commanding her to focus. Working together, they suppress the wild power until it finally stabilizes. Ledger demands her focus, and Flora agrees, determined to finish her spell. Keeping the raw energy stable, Flora glances around the tense room. Her classmates stare back, green with envy, yet she is entirely distracted. The professor reminds her of her father, a man who always belittled her. This humiliating penalty drags up a painful, familiar feeling of absolute defeat. And Alumos never forgets a grudge. She silently vows to get even. One day she will surpass this professor, using her own superior skills. The magical sphere calms down, settling perfectly into her trembling hands. Ledger scolds her immediately. Failed spells are fine, but risking lives is not. Reckless magic is irresponsible. Flora has no choice but to apologize. He points out her obvious inexperience in trying to fuse opposing elements. Yet she stubbornly argues back, insisting she performed the spell perfectly. Without a word, Ledger shows us what true mastery looks like, fusing fire and ice. He creates a perfect, stable sphere, highlighting the massive gap between them. Her reckless fusion merely mimicked frozen flames, which is purely for show. It has no real utility. Watching this, her friend feels deeply sympathetic. Ledger dispels his mana, filling the classroom with a blinding, brilliant light. Glimmering snowflakes begin to fall as he showcases a stunning defensive spell. Mixing hot expansion with bitter cold, he effortlessly snuffs out nearby fire. This practical application completely shatters her pride. Ledger softly explains his reasoning. He is not mocking her skill, openly calling her highly talented. In fact, she is the most gifted student he has ever encountered. However, magic must have purpose, though he has no right to guide her. He places a hand on her shoulder, urging her to find a better path. As Flora stands there questioning her worth, the professor dismisses the class. Ledger walks back down the steps, leaving her with her thoughts. Flora slowly realizes he was actually offering a gentle guidance she never got at home. Exhausted, her mana depleted, she nearly collapses before her friend catches her. Meanwhile, having overexerted himself, the professor quietly grits his teeth in pain. Dizziness washes over him, and he is thankful he took medicine beforehand. He knows her fusion attempt was incredibly advanced, recalling his own past failures. He genuinely hopes she recovers quickly. Soon, the intense class concludes. This display proves the principal was right about this gifted new generation. Suddenly, a quiet wind spell from another student catches Ledger's eye. Renee is casting magic, but her elemental trace is completely missing. It is an impossible anomaly. Intrigued, Ledger officially dismisses the room. He assigns them review homework, then quietly asks Renee to step forward. Fearing she is in trouble, the girl follows. Join us next time to see what happens. She follows him inside. Once in the office, Ledger tells her to wait, and she begins. Panicking, convinced he's going to interrogate her or expel her from his class, she knows she cannot keep studying under him since she lacks any elemental affinity, but she desperately wants to stay in his class. When she spots the professor staring at a document, Renee assumes it is a transfer form. She immediately begins apologizing, promising to work twice as hard to stay in his lectures. Ledger looks confused, asking what she means before handing her a textbook, telling her to study this from now on. The book covers the absolute fundamentals of non-elemental mana, opening a brand new path for her. The professor explains he got the text from an old acquaintance, calling the research that person's life work. Renee realizes someone else also had non-elemental mana, but Ledger gently explains that his friend has already passed away. Hearing this, she wonders why she was born without elemental talent, regretting her shortcomings. Ledger asks Renee if she truly believes a mage with only one element lacks talent. He explains that a single attribute mage has limitless potential to master and manifest that soul element, even altering natural laws once they reach the peak of their power. Feeling the sheer weight of his words, she asks how non-elemental magic actually works. The professor admits it is still a mystery whether the power of such mages is simply the absence of properties, reminding her that the 10th element metal was considered part of Earth for centuries. He tells her not to worry since the magical world is constantly evolving and expanding. He urges her to read the book. Afterward, Ledger reflects on how non-elemental magic is truly fascinating, yet he never expected to encounter such harsh judgment from someone capable of distinguishing right from wrong. Since all of this is so unfamiliar, nothing is guaranteed, but he still cannot believe a book written by that man actually ended up with Renee. He wonders if fate had planned things to happen this way. Soon, a new day begins at the academy where Aiden conjures magic into a spiral of light. He realizes the method taught by the professor is incredibly effective, remembering Ledger's pure devotion to magic. He concludes doubting him was pointless, and there is no shame in loving the craft. Suddenly, Aiden spots a crowd gathered on campus and wonders about the black-haired boy, surrounded by a flock of wealthy nobles. Since he seems to be someone of high status, getting closer, a pompous blonde noble named Jervon sneers that associating with trash who cannot cast a single elemental spell is pathetic. Hearing this, a blue-haired boy named Leo snaps back at the elite, but Aiden urges his friend to relax, trying to defuse the tension. Aiden apologizes to Jervon, saying he never meant to offend him and suggests they just move past it, but Jervon counters that before that happens, Aiden must drop to his knees. A fierce red-haired girl steps in, telling him to have some dignity, but Jervon mocks her as a fallen aristocrat who lacks the breeding to speak up. Aiden warns Jervon that while he can mock him all he wants, he will never tolerate anyone targeting his friends. The arrogant aristocrat sneers that he does not care about forgiveness, demanding to witness his actual strength, challenging him to a formal magic duel. Leo and the girl try to hold him back, but Aiden accepts the challenge. He declares that if he wins, Javon has to apologize to his friends. The noble agrees, though he doubts his Opponent can win. Professor Ledger arrives and asks what the students are doing. The teacher realizes the boy is in another mess and orders them to explain. Jebin reports that he formally requested a magic duel and his opponent accepted. Ledger notes that duels between first-year students are inappropriate, wondering why they are acting this way. He catches the black-haired boy showing off in the back and wonders why the kid is staring at him like that. The professor decides not to punish them for a duel that hasn't happened yet, telling them to return to their dorms. Suddenly, the blue-haired Professor Chris appears and tells him to leave the boys alone, accusing Ledger of abusing his authority. He argues that teachers have no right to stop voluntary duels. Ledger suspects his colleague has an agenda, but warns they cannot ignore the risk of students getting injured. Chris suggests that if they are so concerned, both professors should supervise the duel. Ledger asks Javan and Aiden for their thoughts, and both agree, asking the teachers to watch the match. With their consent, the professors agree to go with Chris's plan. Next, the blue-haired professor proposes a bet to Ledger, arguing it is pointless to watch a duel with such a clear outcome. Chris puts his money on Kyavan Felio, calling him a highly talented mage, assuming his colleague will make the same choice, which would ruin the bet. He asks what Ledger will wager, noticing how easily the challenge was accepted. The professor replies there will not be any issues with those terms, since he already planned to back Aiden from the beginning. Chris laughs, and Ledger asks what he wants to wager. Blue-haired professor suggests wagering their magic study materials. Since they both teach sorcery, Ledger asks if they really teach the same subject, and Chris takes offense, saying he cannot let that insult slide. However, Ledger genuinely did not know they shared the same class type. Then, Ledger agrees to the wager, scheduling the duel for 3 days from now, which Chris thinks is fair. Aiden apologizes to Ledger for causing this mess, and the professor tells him to focus on a winning strategy. He explains that even though Javan comes from an elite family, it is too early to admit defeat, because a duel always has variables. Aiden asks what those variables are, and Ledger says the student already has tools to use at key moments. Aiden thinks he can win with that, but quickly recalls a strange man he once met, so he tells the professor he wants to win using only his own skills. The statement surprises Ledger, and Aiden begs to learn the professor's tactics. In the students' past, a girl asked him not to use her teachings carelessly. Back then, holding a wooden sword, he was warned he would get involved in something critical and dangerous in the future. Also, since teaching was her source of income, he could not let her starve. The boy agreed, and she explained that he should never hesitate when he really needed magic. She advised him to follow his own heart when the time came to make a final decision. In the present, Ledger tries to understand what the student just said. The professor he accepted the wager, relying on the boy's bizarre magic, but Aiden wants to win using his own strength instead of that unique magic. Spotting a perfect opportunity to test the young wizard's skills, Ledger agrees, promising to teach him how to gain the upper hand in a duel between sorcerers. Aiden is warned that this training will be absolute hell with no guarantee of victory, but he still moves forward. They begin training immediately. Ledger knows their proud rivals are already celebrating Javan's victory, and he is eager to see what unfolds in the later. Aiden collapses, exhausted, inside his room after a brutal workout. Unable to believe he must repeat this torment for 2 more days, he wonders why the professor is so certain he will win using his unique magic, since nobody else even knows about it. Falling asleep, he wonders if the professor might know something he does not. Elsewhere, Chris believes Ledger is desperate to win. The blue-haired professor summons Javan, assuming the boy must know the reason for this meeting. The highborn student replies that it is to secure his victory against the peasant. Chris answers that simply winning is not enough. They need to prove the massive gap between an aristocrat and a commoner. To make sure of the outcome, he hands a mana potion to the student to drink before their battle. Javan Falio notes he will face disqualification if he gets caught, since the elixir is a restricted product of the Benamor family. Chris argues that the commoner will try any dirty trick to win, so they must respond in kind. The student concedes the professor is right, and though it wounds his pride, he thinks it beats losing to his lowborn opponent. Chris praises Javan for making the right choice. When the day of the duel finally arrives, the arena and the Stands are packed with eager students. They wonder if the nobles will win due to their inherent advantages, but they respect the strength of the rookie commoner who survived that terrifying werewolf incident, since Ledger trained Aiden and Chris. Backs the other side, the instructors are inevitably compared since they teach the exact same subject. The blue-haired professor desperately wants to crush Ledger's arrogance and defeat him in front of the entire academy. Soon after, the headmaster of Soren Academy arrives at the scene, greeting Chris and Ledger. She brings up the wager between the professors and asks for Ledger's prediction, who confirms his money is on. Aiden, the headmaster, notes that student safety remains their top priority, and another female sorceress guarantees that a powerful barrier will absorb the impact of the strikes. Aiden arrives clad in heavy armor, and his friends urge him to crush his rival's arrogance. Meanwhile, the noble faction demands that Javan defend the honor of the aristocracy. The referee steps forward to check the conditions of the duel, and Aiden reminds Javan to keep his word. Javan replies that he can only demand that if he actually wins. The referee questions the object in Aiden's sheath. Aiden explains it is a magic staff shaped like a sword, which is perfectly legal. Since it has no cutting edge or sharp tip, the referee declares that the first one to have their protective magic fully drained will lose and starts the duel. Aiden instantly casts a freezing ice spell through his staff, and Javan counters at the exact same speed with fire. The commoner expects his opponent to strike back with something. Javan notices the clear elemental disadvantage, but fueled by the potion, he boosts his fire and overpowers Aiden's spell. Aiden leaps aside to dodge the blast. Watching the impact shatter the wall, the rookie senses the terrifying gap in power. Javan scoffs that the massive distance between them cannot be bridged, mocking him. Undeterred, Aiden summons a magic circle at his staff's tip, launching a counter-firestorm straight at the noble's spell. Leo watches anxiously as his friend is slowly forced backward. Aiden decides to use Professor Ledger's direct advice and charges ahead to close the gap, convincing Javan that the peasant has abandoned the wizard duel. Professor Chris assumes the match is already over, but then spots Aiden sprinting toward the elite while materializing a spell crest on his staff. He realizes the boy is using mobile casting, wondering how Ledger could have taught him that in just 3 days. The instructor is stunned a commoner mastered such a battle art so quickly. Javan knows it is incredibly tough to focus and cast while moving, so he rapidly prepares a spell to disrupt his charging target, yet Aiden slips past, shattering the noble's defense without his own focus shaking. The kid closes in and fires point-blank from his staff, blasting Javan squarely in the forehead. The proud noble collapses to his knees as Aiden aims the weapon at his skull, declaring it as his turn. Javan loses his mind, begging for mercy while letting out a cowed shriek. The referee calls the match, lifting the commoner's hand, while the spectators erupt and his allies cheer for their hard work. The elites sneer in disgust, calling the defeated Baron a disgrace to their class who merely clung to their coattails, ruined by his bruised ego. Javan shrieks, accusing his opponent of using cheap tricks to cast while running, throwing a cowardly spell as soon as Aiden turns away. The audience reacts with fury, screaming at the boy to dodge the strike. As the blazing heat closes in, Aiden recalls his mentor's advice about trusting his instincts. He draws his blade, parting the fire cleanly, protecting himself and the instructor. His effortless neutralization of the spell shocks the crowd, leaving Flora Lumos completely baffled by how he shut down the attack. Ledger proudly notes his pupil used more than just mobile casting, revealing anti-magic, a rare art that snuffs out other spells. Stunned, Javan has a second to react before Aiden closes in and decks him. The commoner leaves him cold, calling him garbage for resorting to cheap backstabs. Rather than accepting his loss, the pathetic display turns the noble's stomachs, and Freudan Walsberg remarks that he never cared about the pathetic Baron, but he must watch Aiden, who has proven superior to average blue bloods. With that, Henry and his companion depart. Moments later, Freudan passes right by the young hero, attempting to catch his eye before snubbing him. Meanwhile, Ledger resumes his chat with Chris, mentioning he already understood his pupil's knack for anti-magic. He notes that the supervisor should have monitored the students instead of neglecting their files, even though this magic did not decide the outcome of their wager, which concerned academic projects. Chris asks if Ledger demands anything more. Ledger shrugs it off, claiming he never sought any extra reward. Ledger rejects Chris's research, declaring that taking someone's hard work as payment for a bet isn't his style. Before walking out, Chris feels deeply insulted. He feels utterly looked down upon. Meanwhile, Ledger runs into Sedna in the hallway. She congratulates him on his victory, warning him that he will inevitably draw all of Soren's attention for mentoring a commoner, but Ledger sees this as a major advantage. The principal has been keeping a close eye on both of them for quite some time, making it hard to escape her suspicion. However, earning public praise for this success slowly begins to turn the tide. Ledger then asks Sedna to help him, noting that his meeting a random student would look incredibly suspicious. On the other hand, a typical professor can easily approach a star pupil. He instructs her to play the model student. Sedna eagerly accepts the high-priority mission, swearing to accomplish it at all costs. Ledger simply warns her not to overdo things and stay alive. But she bizarrely insists that she won't die even if she passes away, which makes him drop the subject. However, his recent actions made him seem loyal to the principal, forcing him to warn the Black Dawn to act with extreme caution. Ledger knows he must establish his own faction. Just then, his magical communication device rings. Hans is briefing him on the surrounding districts but admits he has no eyes inside the dangerous back alleys. Ledger decides it is time to deploy his influence, warning that he is on his way to see Hans, promising a swift resolution. Meanwhile, in another part of town, scarred redhead slams his mug onto the wooden table, complaining about his bad luck. He grumbles that Belfort should have handed over the investment money before dying, which ultimately led to the loss of all their operational funds. He gathered his crew to figure out a new way to expand their business on a massive scale, since the Black Rose faction ruined their original plans. Suddenly, a mysterious man in a black cloak arrives, and the frustrated redhead repeatedly warns him that the bar is closed. Ledger recognizes this man as Dudur, boss of the Red Society. He politely apologizes and introduces himself as James Moriarty. Dudur fails to recognize the name at first until he remembers the legendary crime consultant who once ruled the back alleys of the Delica Kingdom. Deciding to test him, Dudur mentions he has heard all about Professor Moriarty but cannot verify his true identity. Ledger asks if the gang boss suspects he is an imposter. The redhead simply replies that a dangerous stranger has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The professor calmly suggests they lower the weapons aimed at him, warning that their cheap tactics will not work. Unfazed, Dudur orders his men to shoot the intruders' shoulders, but as they prepare to pull their triggers, their guns fail to fire. Ledger has cast a silent spell to disable their weapons. Without anyone noticing, suddenly the bar door is smashed open as a massive werewolf enters and stands beside Ledger. The terrified thugs ask if he is controlling these beasts, but the monster simply demands an explanation first. Previously, Hans had briefed Ledger on how the lawless back alleys are divided among 4 rival syndicates, with the Red Society reigning as the largest and dirtiest of them all. Ledger concludes they are his prime target. The main gang rejects the idea of starting from the bottom, believing that crushing the leader will force the rest to surrender quickly. Hans warns that the timing is terrible since they are gathered right after Belfort's death. Hearing this, Ledger connects the dots between Belfort, the Red Society, and the incidents in Arzen, all dirty work done by the gang. With their wealthy backer dead and tempers flaring, it is actually the perfect moment to strike. Hans warns their combat strength rivals that of mercenaries or amateur knights. Ledger knows such knights are weak, but asks for Hans's help to set a terrifying mood using a beast. Hans warns he will flee the moment blood spills, but Ledger only needs him to put on a show. Inside, the leader of the Red Society refuses to underestimate this sudden intruder. He prepared for magic, but a werewolf bodyguard was completely unexpected. Assuming James is a true nobleman, the boss quickly apologizes for his rudeness, then asks what kind of enterprise James wants to launch in the city, offering his assistance. James calmly states he despises their filthy crimes, declaring that the Red Society ends today. Enraged, the leader orders his men to attack the beast while he lunges at James, but James easily deflects him with a cane. Strike, the thugs draw their daggers, and a panicked Hans yells that they are not backing down. James calmly tells him to brace himself, then slams his staff onto the floor. Pitch black magic floods the tavern, turning the room completely dark, leaving the blind enemies entirely unable to fight since they cannot see a thing. James then unsheathes a lethal sword hidden inside his cane, unleashing Tier 3 Dark Magic, a fool's dream, blending shadows and a curse to shatter his opponent's minds. Slowly, he begins executing the helpless thugs. The panicked leader screams at them to kill the intruder, but his men cannot strike what they cannot see. James coats his blade with violet magic and unleashes a devastating slash that illuminates the bar. The leader collapses in horror as he sees James standing tall amidst his slaughtered men, unable to comprehend this power. The Associated Knights manage to pierce James's magic using their auras, launching a fierce assault. He effortlessly dodges their blades until he drops a glass vial onto the floor. Toxic smoke billows through the air, forcing the knights back, confident their internal mana will shield them. But from within the thick haze, a volley of daggers flies at them. One knight deflects the projectiles, but his sword suddenly shatters. The corrosive poison splashes onto his skin, melting holes right through it upon direct contact, proving the flying daggers were nothing but a clever trap. The agonizing knight scans for the killer, who suddenly rises from a shadow on the floor to impale the helpless warrior. James yanks his blade from the skull, tossing the corpse to the ground. Terrified, the last surviving gang member asks if he is truly Professor Moriarty. Shocked by his deadly combat skills, James coldly answers that there is no need to explain, as everyone in this room is already dead. The final knight mocks him, exposing his guard in a foolish belief he can win. James instantly closes the distance, lunging forward at blistering speed with drawn steel. While tossing another glass vial of toxic purple venom, his desperate opponent scoffs that it is useless, raising his sword to deflect it. However, he realizes his weapon is pinned to the ground by a sticky sludge from the shattered vial. Instantly, James draws his gun and aims it straight at the opponent. The knight drops his weapon to dodge the shot, but a sword made of shadow impales him. James's arm emerged from the enemy's shadow on the ground, piercing him, and attacked the knight. Never expected, believing magic could only be channeled through a spellcaster's physical form. Just like that, the hero defeats his opponent. Without even needing to fire his gun, the knight collapses and James keeps rushing forward, stopping right in front of the Red Society's leader, warning him that they are finally going to finish their conversation. Then the hero sheds his disguise while a drink is poured into a clean glass. Hands asks how he can drink in this situation, especially with his sensitive nose and inability to stand the smell of fluid. James explains that the leader of the group is still alive because he plans to extract crucial information and hand him over to rival organizations. Hans is confident James will handle everything and asks what he is drinking, discovering it is 38-year-old Gorgonha. The assistant decides he wants a glass of that fine liquor, too, and asks what they will do with the remaining Red Society members. The hero replies that he will recruit a few who seem like decent people. Hans mentions there are documents and a secret ledger on the second floor to assist them, but worries it is far too much work for only 2 people. James answers that he already has a plan and knows plenty of people who can help. Hans asks if he is serious, and the hero promises those people will arrive as soon as they finish their current job, teasing if Hans hates them. That much. Hans admits he absolutely loathes them, claiming there is not a single sane person among the hero's many eccentric acquaintances. Despite the constant grumbling, they will follow through with the plan. Hans brings up the headmistress's growing suspicions and asks how things are going. James assures him there is no danger since the mages won't risk following them without absolute proof, since the headmistress herself is closely watched by the opposition. She will not make any moves that could backfire. Knowing the strategy to seize control of Leatherbilk, Hans notes that everything is going smoothly and asks what the name of this brand new secret organization will be and how many members they have recruited so far. The protagonist answers that there are 10 members and suggests the name Unwen, explaining the goal is to keep the organization completely hidden. Hans loves the name, and the two decide to share one final drink, raising a toast to the secret syndicate they have just founded. Later, a female colleague approaches Professor Ludger, asking why he has no assistant. Eating quietly, the protagonist pauses to reflect and answers that he has not felt the need yet. The woman remarks that teaching must be difficult. 80 students all by himself, and she is stunned when he finds it so effortless. In reality, Ludger was overworking himself to death for absolutely nothing. Simply because he had no idea he was allowed an assistant, he asks if Selena employs any helpers, and she confirms she currently has 3 assistants, even. Though she does not actually need that much support, Ludger silently notes her situation. He compares himself to Benamor and starts getting a clever idea. They usually have 10 helpers. The other professors urge him to recruit some. He would need at least 5 assistants because managing everything alone is impossible. Ludger thanks the professors and goes to his office to think about potential assistants. He realizes these helpers receive bonus points and unlimited private lessons. Even rookie instructors have at least 6 assistants on their team, since some prefer researching magic with tutors over graduating. The academy runs like a 21st century college, deciding it would be helpful to find someone for minor tasks. He begins scanning a list of names until one specific candidate catches his eye. He tracks down the student, arriving outside the boys' room, but senses a presence tailing him. He demands they step out from behind the door. His secret accomplice suddenly appears and apologizes, explaining she saw him walking by and wanted to talk. Ludger decides to let it slide, saying it is fine. He asks if she has class on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12, which matches his teaching hours. The girl confirms she is free on those days, wondering if he has a task for her. Ludger finds her availability perfect and offers her the assistant position. She accepts, asking what that actually entails. He explains this role will let them associate naturally without raising suspicion, especially since her name is on a list of top students. He instructs her to submit the registration paperwork in 2 days, believing that keeping her nearby will let him gather intel on the Black Dawn organization piece by piece. Barely an hour later, she delivers the finished paperwork, leaving him slightly unsettled by her incredible speed. Ludger praises her efficiency, amazed to have secured a helper so fast, and leaves to prepare his next lesson. Meanwhile, a few female students notice the campus is much louder than usual because of rumors about the professor seeking assistants. The news excites the student body, since he had ignored everyone until now. Many assumed he did not even realize helpers existed. Aside from this hot topic, students whisper about a legendary rumor concerning the universal stone, a mythical artifact that grants wishes and lies hidden inside the academy. One student doubts if such an item even exists, but her friend insists it must, given the academy is the heart of magic and holds countless unsolved secrets. Standing nearby, Flora Lumos overhears their chatter and dismisses it as childish. She believes the stone is a myth and that noble families would have seized it long ago. Turning her attention to the teaching assistant positions, Flora notes that someone of her high caliber would set a perfect example, deciding she might accept if the professor personally invited her. When Ludger finally arrives, a hush falls over the room and his new assistant steps inside. Nobody recognizes the girl, leaving everyone in the class, including a stunned Flora Lumos, shocked that he selected someone so rapidly. Ludger quietly tells Sita she did an excellent job and dismisses her from the classroom. He does not comprehend why the students are staring at him with such bizarre expressions and tells the class to pay attention because the lecture is starting. Once he finishes, the professor warns that today's material will appear on the upcoming exam, urging them to study hard. Right then, a student named Julia Plumbart, who ranked first in the supported by the Magic Tower since her entrance exam, she asks a question. Julia is thrilled that Ludger actually remembers her name and asks how he chose his assistant. The professor, who already saw this coming, answers that the decision was entirely own. He claims he ignored standard requirements like elite magic skills, asking the students why he would need to hire someone so famous that everyone already knows. Ludger immediately notices the students' question is not born from simple curiosity. He states he only evaluates character when selecting an assistant, welcoming candidates with solid morals to apply for an interview. Next, he declares that Julia will not need to take this step because she already proved she is unfit for the job. After basically calling her dishonest, he scans the silent room for more questions. He warns everyone about the upcoming exam, tells them to study, and heads out. But as he walks away, something catches his eye. Ludger spots his new assistant, asking if she waited out here this whole time, and tells her to wait in his office next time instead of the hallway. She stammers nervously before quickly changing the subject to wish him a Productive day. In response, he simply hands her a thick stack of papers, right after. Flora Lugos approaches the professor, who calmly asks what she needs. She mentions hearing about his choice for assistant, and he asks if she wants the job. She denies it instantly, making him ask why she came to find him. Stunned for a second, she explains she only wanted to thank him for saving her, admitting his advice was right. He replies that he merely did his duty, glad she took his words to heart. Then Flora asks if he is recovering well after exhausting so much. Mana and Ludger assures her he is fine. She then asks how many elements he can wield since he displayed 5 during his lecture. He claims those 5 are his limit. In reality, he can control all 10 elements, but that makes him look like an average mage who masters none of them fully, since exposing his true power would put him in a tough spot. He sticks to his story. Flora is thoroughly impressed, and with no more questions, he dismisses her, adding that she is always welcome to apply for the open position if she ever changes her mind. She hesitates, trying to say something else, but stops herself, deeply annoyed by her own inability to speak openly. Later, inside the grand hall of the prestigious Soren Academy, Ludger meets with the principal, asking why she summoned him. She asks if he heard the latest rumors of a legendary universal stone hidden within the academy. He confirms this, but dismisses it as a simple student rumor. However, the principal warns him that the wish-granting object is very real and has been kept here for a long time. The professor realizes it must be an ancient relic, which she confirms, describing it as an unknown item hundreds of times stronger than anything made by a great mage. She reveals the academy has kept it hidden for ages, but since this was a massive secret, the rumors suggest a leak occurred, likely during the transport for its regular maintenance. Because it is a very specific rumor, she asks the professor to investigate. He decided to look into things, showing clear interest in her proposal. On the surface, it seemed like the principal trusted him with this task, but she would never trust him so easily. This assignment was likely a trap to probe his past. Using this opportunity, the headmistress ordered Ledger to report any suspicious activity and assist with the upcoming transport of the relic. She warned him that another professor was also on the job, though their paths wouldn't cross. During the mission, he understood immediately, guessing she wanted to keep him away from Chris Benmore, since there was still some time left before the transport. Ledger chose to act normal despite knowing about the information leak in Soren, the Black Order's movements, and the radio silence from Sinita. He wasn't sure if another First Order was involved, or if some other incident was brewing, but hunting for a relic at the school made him reflect on all the different identities he had used across the globe. Ledger had roamed various lands as a mercenary, a criminal advisor, and a merchant just to track down a specific broken artifact. He originally joined the academy after hearing whispers of one in the Empire, but he never expected it to be kept right here in Soren. Even though it wasn't the exact piece he sought, he knew using the academy's universal stone to track his own artifact was his best option. Soon after, Ledger got a call from Hans on his communication globe. The informant warned that the other 3 factions had gone quiet since the Red Society fell, but they were desperate to seize control and were starting to act reckless. The professor said he could assist in a week, and when asked if something went wrong, he revealed that the school held a relic. Hans laughed, teasing him about always getting into trouble, even joking that the principal kept a secret dungeon, but Ludger shut him down. Hans complained about his partner's lack of humor before mentioning he was off to see a certain woman whom the professor should also pay a visit. He would go immediately if possible, but chose to hold his post on the principal's orders. That universal stone remained a golden opportunity, especially since hunting down artifacts was tough. He had only recovered 3 during his past journeys. Judging by its shape, 4 more pieces were required to make the artifact whole. Luger clasped the relic in his hands and began plotting his ultimate move for when all 7 pieces were finally gathered. Meanwhile, Princess Arendir dismissed her servants after they asked if she needed any further assistance. The royal student felt utterly drained by the endless pressure of her status and just wanted to rest in peace right until a call came through. Terina apologized for ringing so late with such grave news, bringing up the recent werewolf attack at the academy. The princess clarified that the new instructor, Ludger Chelsea, had handled the threat. The caller then revealed she was probing a highly classified case and planned to meet the mysterious teacher soon. Tina also warned that the first princess felt ignored and was waiting for a call. It was a clear message that Erend understood instantly. Hanging up, the noble tried to rest, feeling relieved. Now that the call was over, she knew Torina's warning was just her sister's subtle way of showing love, though this upcoming meeting with the new instructor made her deeply uneasy. Meanwhile, Tina questioned Enya regarding the investigation at the factory. The investigator explained she had analyzed some partially burned papers. It clearly pointed to some hidden research and development, but details remained scarce. Finding any specifics was impossible. Naturally, Tina asked if they had other clues. Since they could not proceed with so little, that is when Enya reported. The Red Society, a notorious back-alley syndicate, vanished from Leatherbull overnight. When asked if this tied back to their case, the investigator replied, "There is none, but keep it in mind." Torina decided they did not need to stress over it. They would focus on their own search instead, ordering a local sweep before they set off for Soren Academy. Meanwhile, strange rumors about Professor Ludger had been spreading through the campus. Since the unruly students often acted on their own, he knew more headaches lay ahead. Spotting his class slacking off, the professor slammed a heavy book down. He woke them up, announcing that since everyone seemed so bored, he would show them something fascinating. Ludger explained that normal mages always cast spells using their own bodies as the focal point because of their mana, but he claimed this process could be different. Next, he suddenly conjured a bright flame right before a dozing student. He demonstrated how shifting magic creates a small gap in the casting process. Normally, the limit is just 1 meter. However, if they can handle a massive surge in mana consumption, they can surpass that limit easily. The professor calls this technique the coordinate formula. Flora Lumos and her classmates were completely stunned, wondering where on earth he had discovered such incredible magic. Ludger noted that while intriguing, the trick was just a basic tweak. He warned them to focus on class and offered extra credit points to whoever cracked the formula and brought it to his office. Right after class, his shady assistant from the back alleys arrived to speak. Ludger dismissed her outside before activating a secure magic barrier, knowing they must get in touch. The headmistress quickly reported a critical emergency. The universal stone was gone. She confessed to underestimating their cunning foes, who apparently knew about the secret vault and struck without warning. Regretting her oversight, the headmistress warned that while guards pursued them, the danger would skyrocket if they actually activated the ancient magic stone. Estimating they only have until midnight, Ludger decided that taking action was far better than wasting time asking questions. Taking the job, he had fully anticipated this trouble, just not so incredibly quickly. He still harbored deep doubts about the headmistress, suspecting she might belong to the shadowy rogue organization, wondering who actually stole the relic and how. Ludger called his assistant inside, noting a subordinate had acted alone. When she agreed, the professor demanded she detail how the heist went down from the very beginning. She reported that a low-ranking spy uncovered secret documents about the Universal Stone right here in Soren. After spreading the word, he located the artifact and tipped off the higher-ranking Second Order, who instantly chose to strike without any official approval. The mastermind behind this rogue operation is Demlis, a government-tied fixer who specializes in these dirty jobs. She notes that given its massive importance, they should have notified the First Order. The assistant theorizes that Demlis is aiming for a seat within the First Order, especially since Order Zero decreed that those 7 elite seats are up for grabs. Lacking actual talent, the ambitious youth decided to make a name by stealing the stone. The professor asks about their current situation, and his assistant asks if he will act alone. Ludger confirms he must go solo as the thieves are already being hunted, and any mistake would compromise their secret identities. She reports that the culprits fled straight toward the eerie silent forest. Following the heist, the professor decides to head there immediately, highly praising Sunita for gathering such flawless intel before instructing her to guard the academy. He will handle this personally. As the professor quietly exits the room, Ludger notices his brief praise filled the girl with immense pride. Showing a curious expression, he wonders if this is pure loyalty or if she harbors hidden motives. Shaking it off, he focuses entirely on what matters most. Right Now casting Nocturnus, Ludger conjures a dark summoning tree known as the Magic Path and slips into the shadows. This advanced spell drains massive mana, but it completely masks his presence, making detection absolutely impossible, just as he glides past, a young girl named Flora Lumos suddenly snaps her head around, prompting her friend to ask what happened. Flora senses a cloaked entity after feeling a residual magical pulse. Suspicious, she gazes toward the professor. Deep within the woods, three guards whisper nervously about the silent forest, muttering that they should have gathered reinforcements before entering such a hostile zone. Ludger slips right past them, his footsteps entirely silent. Unaware, the guards note that the rapidly expanding woods drive intruders completely insane, concluding that blocking the pathway is their safest move. Entering the sector, the professor locates the rogue group, where one bandit is losing his mind while another demands he get a grip, a pink-haired mage asks Demolus what the actual plan is, since the academy forces have surrounded them and they cannot survive in these woods forever. Demolus barks at the underling to shut up, claiming a grand strategy, but panic quickly sets in as he studies the stolen universal stone in his hands. The artifact remains completely inert, despite radiating tremendous energy. Suddenly he senses a presence, demanding to know who is there. Ludger appears and observes the sparse group, mockingly asking if the rest were captured or abandoned. Demolus realizes he is facing John Doe. He trembles, knowing the First Order sees everything and offers zero mercy. Ludger coldly asks if he understands the reason for this personal visit. Kneeling, Demolus offers the glowing green stone to the First Order, swearing it is the legendary relic. Ludger takes the artifact, praises the rogue's effort, and bids farewell as he slips into the darkness. Instantly, he executes all three, brutally piercing their bodies with sharp shadow spikes. Before taking his final breath, Demolus chokes out, asking why the Order betrayed them. Ludger clutches the stone, stating that explanations are a waste of time, but as he inspects the object, he is shocked to find immense magic power, yet it is not the real relic, directly contradicting the principal's claims. Suddenly, a bright light flashes above Ludger as a massive pink beam strikes down from the sky, hitting his exact spot and causing a massive explosion that scatters cherry petals and leaves a massive crater. Inside the smoking hole, only the green stone remains, lying there until a woman walks over to pick it up. She remarks that she blasted it with immense power and didn't expect the artifact to survive without a scratch. The principal declares that it is over and grabs the fake gem, hoping to profit heavily from her bait while hoping the professor escaped, but watching from a high tree branch, the wounded professor realizes just how close he came to dying. Having seen the strike coming, he activated his secret spell, Ether Nocturnus, in order to escape with the fake artifact. Since true teleportation does not exist in this world, he relied on his custom coordinate formula to escape the blast. Ludger realizes that Principal Elise Willow, a rank 6 mage, set this trap. Using the counterfeit stone after discovering his true identity, this forced teleportation heavily drains his mana, triggering a brutal headache. He quickly swallows pills to recover. He realizes the principal chose to handle this completely alone, to keep things efficient, hiding the truth from her allies as a formidable opponent. Suddenly, he senses someone approaching and immediately spins around. Leveling his cane right at Flora Lumos, he demands to know why she is wandering around this restricted forest. Flora snaps back, demanding to know why the professor is here and what caused that massive magical explosion. Ludger warns her that the woods are highly dangerous for students and orders her to leave, but she protests, claiming she is not weak. He observes that the young girl saw nothing suspicious and merely snuck past the guards stationed at the entrance. Meanwhile, Flora struggles to explain that she simply followed a strange gut feeling and tracked him down. Suddenly, her blonde friend cries out her name in terror, prompting Ludger to tell them both to follow him. Toward the exit, silently, Flora notices the professor staring down at his shaking hand near 3 pills on the bark, wondering what medicine he took and whether he is ill. Just then, the principal appears and Ludger reports finding the girls wandering the silent woods and bringing them back to safety, prompting Flora to take the blame, claiming she snuck out alone while Cheryl merely followed. Elise accepts this and asks how they should proceed, noting she just settled a highly pressing matter nearby. The professor immediately realizes that devastating blast was her doing and volunteers to escort the students Back to their dorms. Later, the principal informs an old man that she cleared Ludger of all suspicion based on his reaction. The elder asks why they are circulating rumors, and she explains it is necessary to lure the rats into their trap. Moving elsewhere, they head into a secure hall to ensure the genuine relic is safe. They are relieved the artifact is untouched, recalling that this highly dangerous object once destroyed an entire kingdom before they finally exit the chamber. Moments later, a dark shadow emerges and Ludger slips inside, knowing he placed a tracking spell on the fake stone. He knew the principal would inspect the real one immediately, leading him straight to the prize. The raw mana of the authentic relic is immense, drawing Ludger in with its pull, but he understands its limits and knows it cannot truly control him. To grant his deepest wish, the hero places his hand on the relic to find the location of his artifact's remaining pieces. Suddenly, a massive amount of energy surges forward, trying to crawl inside him. Ludger orders the stone to remain still and forces his way in, knowing that no matter the wish, the object will shatter. Instantly, the protagonist's bright blue energy clashes with the stone's green magic, starting to suppress it. He manages to hold back the wild power, using his wish to seek the remaining parts. Just as the hero suspected, the stone cannot reveal everything, but he never expected to get this close to finding the artifacts. Afterward, Ludger meets Hans, who immediately asks what happened to Rung. The protagonist replies that it is over, and he will start the plan tomorrow night, which Hans believes is best given their strict time limit. Ludger explains that not everything went smoothly and recovering the relic will be tough. Hans finds it understandable after so many wild events, commenting that it is just an artifact piece that is not worth all this trouble. Without giving too many details, the hero reveals there are two pieces, and the next one is in Lerberg, based on the vision from the stone. Ludger assumes the relic is inside an auction house. Hans points out it is the Kunst, the city's only auction house, warning that a massive event is